This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Dean Gilbert in the third chair.
I reject your reality and substitute my own. No, really, that's what the game's about.
With contributions from Total Fangirl.
Vampires do not sparkle.
And our loyal listener.
Crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming. Coming at the speed of a storm knight from a very fast cosm, entering a very slow cosm, and breaking all the axioms. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our friends at Patreon who help us keep the lights on. Tonight, that would be Scott Garvin, Scott Eisensee, Scott Parrish, Sean Kellogg, and Seppi Yoon.
Ooh, Seppi!
I'm Geekly McNardigan, your host. Today, our panelists are Russ Rules Wonk Wakelin and RPG Master and High Lord of Zone Torg Cosm, Dean Dark God Gilbert. Let's begin. Issue number 1. In 1990, Greg Gordon and Bill Slavicek developed the multi-genre RPG Torg with West End Games, and the invasion of the Earth's mundane cosm was begun. Now, within the canon of the game, the High Lords of the various cosms are all fighting to become the Torg. But, of course, that's not how the word originally came about. Question. In the earliest days of development of the game, Torg stood for the other role-playing game. What possible name considered for the game originally has since been recently stolen by GW? Orosh Russ.
Dark Imperium.
Land Below Dean.
I am so embarrassed I do not know this answer.
Oh, that would be Shadow Wars!
Oh.
And that's one down. Issue number 1 or 2. Issue number 2. I'm just reveling in my issue number 1. Among the many alterations, the new Warhammer 40,000, bringing the grimmest, darkest galaxy of all time, 8th edition, to the consolidation of 100 pages of rules down to 8, a raft of adjustments and wholesale changes, and the long-time coming consolidation of infantry, monster discretions, and vehicle rules into one coherent rule set that remains consistent across the game. Question. If your squad of 5 Primaris intercessors fire their bolt rifles at the fetid bloat drone in their shooting phase from 14 inches away, then assault the rotted poxwalkers 8 inches away in the opposite direction, how many attacks will they throw? Eric Tyrannus Russ.
Including shooting, 25.
Apollo Diomedes Dean.
24.
Technically, that would be shots versus attacks. I was asking for attacks. 10. That's it. Just 10. They each have 2 attacks, and that's it. But the key thing is that they could do that at all. Issue number 3. Time travel is a core concept to so much of our science fiction and fantasy stories. No matter what the tech level or the form and shape of the time machine, whether it's a DeLorean, police box, or a gym bag, it's central to many memes, tropes, and plots. Question. According to the physicists at the physics forums, what form would a real time machine take? Rose Tyler Russ.
A plasma bubble.
Donnie Darko Dean.
A giant cylinder rotating extremely fast that's infinitely long.
Interesting. Firstly, you must look at Gödel universes or other typologically non-trivial spacetimes. This still does not allow for time machines, just a structure of spacetimes that could, in theory, allow one to travel backwards in time. None of these models are actually viable for a universe with any matter, really, and almost all relativists throw out any spacetime that allows for those closed timeline loops like you want for being unphysical and very unlike the universe we perceive. So, to go back, nothing. Nothing would look like a real-time machine. To go forward in time, your desk chair would be fine, unless you want to go forward in time faster than you're already going in forward in time, in which case we go back to nothing, which makes you both wrong. Issue number 4. With the release of Warhammer 40,000 8th Edition, Games Workshop is, for the first time in 30 years, moving the narrative of their iconic Burning Galaxy forward. Primarchs, dead or gone for 10,000 years, are returning. Chaos, knocked off Earth 10,000 years ago, have made their triumphant return. Iconic planets have been destroyed or dragged into the warp. Famous and infamous named characters have died. And a massive warp storm has torn the Imperium of Man in two, killing half of the Space Marine chapters in the process. Question. Out of the 280 pages of the new hardcover rulebook, how many pages are dedicated to the story? Lehman Russ.
271.
Dorn Dean.
203.
Dean's a little closer, but unfortunately you both went over and you're wrong. And Russ is just ridiculously wrong because he thinks that the entire hardcover rulebook only includes the 8 pages of the basic rules.
I do.
And then nothing but fluff, which makes you both wrong, but Russ doubly wrong. And that's just wrong. That's it for now. Thanks for listening and good night. Oh, it's 172 out of the 280. Let me give you the answer there. 172 pages of fluff, which gives you what? 108 pages of rules and missions and other cool stuff that you need to play the game to the fullest extent of the rules. That's it for night. Good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by
Battle Foam, protecting your army so you don't have to.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more.
Hello!
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 215, Craig.
215 is a big number,
It
Russ.
feels like it's getting larger. Of the D6 Generation, I am Russ Wakeland.
I am Craig Gallant.
And I am Dean Gilbert.
Hey, Dean, welcome to the show. So welcome
Yeah,
back,
good
I
to be
should
back.
say. Of course, Dean, has graced the third chair before, and so thank you for returning, Dean. And Dean, of course, many credits, but not the least of which is Mr. Torg RPG Guy, as I would like to call him.
Indeed.
So we're really excited to have Dean back on the show because the Torg Kickstarter is in full swing, getting mad props, mad visits, mad backing. And so we'd love to talk to Dean a little bit today about, Torg, what it is, what it's all about, why he's passionate about it, what they're doing with the Kickstarter, how the new edition's going to have the same old stuff, but new cool stuff too. So all of that later, right, Dean?
Yep.
But first, and also a little bit later, Craig has in his hot little hands, our friends at Games Workshop were kind enough to send our humble little podcast. And
It's the new Games Workshop, ladies and gentlemen.
They're friendly, they're fun, they're trying to let us folks, I'm using air quotes here, influencers, check the game out early. So Craig has a copy in his greedy little mitts. I've not seen it yet because he's been hoarding it in his house, apparently, is what's happening.
I have indeed.
So we've had a chance to peruse the rules, as well as Craig's even got a game under his belt. So we thought we'd chat a little bit about our first impressions of the new hotness, Warhammer 40,000 8th edition, which is hitting the streets this month, right, Craig? A little later this month, June.
Yep. Just in it'll be about a week when you hear this episode.
Shortly after you hear this episode. So
Still time to get your pre-orders in.
yeah, there is. But before all that, we should probably talk a little bit about a couple things we've got going on. First of all, we actually happened to run into Dean, not at Tim Hortons, but at Dunkin' Donuts. Totally by accident.
Yes, but there was a vicious struggle in the time-space continuum as he tried to turn Dunkin' Donuts into a Tim Hortons.
Yes.
But as is usually the case, the Tim Hortons spirit was not strong enough, and everything snapped back with the elasticity of the Dunkin' Donuts and became once again the cosmic Dunkin' Donuts we know and love.
It is.
And it would have worked, too, if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
That's right.
Yeah, it was those darn kids.
So we did run into Dean there. Now, Dean, do you remember what we discussed in the Dunkin'
I think in the future we discussed time travel.
We did. We talked about what seems to be a bevy. Would you say that we have a plethora, Craig, of time travel shows?
A plethora, a bevy, a flock.
Right. A pod, if you will, of time travel shows.
A blessing.
Right.
What is a group of time travelers called?
I don't know, but they all fit in a TARDIS. I know that much. So we talked about all these different shows and what we think of them, which ones we like. We talked about some of the time travel rules, if you will, in some of these shows. So I had a lot of fun with that. So if you want to listen to that, Craig, how does someone go about listening to Dean and ourselves talk about time travel? How would they go about getting access to that episode?
They listen very attentively to you describe how to get there.
That's right. So you go to our Patreon page, and the easiest way to get there is to remember the name of this show, The D6 Generation. Go to the d6generation.com. In the upper right-hand corner, click the Patreon logo. It's white with a little orange P. And when you click that, it will take you to our Patreon page where there's a lovely video of Craig and myself explaining how the whole thing works. And if you choose to back the show, basically that's give us a little tip for every episode we put out. If you do that nice thing for us, for $2 an episode, for example, we will then hook you up with the entire library of lost chapters now, numbering in the hundreds. Well, 140 or something. Those are roughly about 20 minutes to half an hour each. So that is many, many hours of extra content you can get your hands on of Craig and myself and many different third chairs yammering on about random topics, including things like time travel shows, right?
Yep.
So thank you for all our patrons who make that stuff happen. We really appreciate it. Also, been getting a lot of email and Twitter questions about this, Craig and Dean, and that's about our Gen Con event. And the question we're asking, because Gen Con event registration is now open and Gen Con fans are out there. Where's our event? Our event has been submitted quite some time ago. Gen Con is still reviewing it, and these things happen. They take time. I don't know exactly what the High Council of Wizards at Gen Con does to approve these sorts of things, but they're
different every year.
They're working on it, and when they do approve it, we will let you guys know. We're shooting for 8:00 on Thursday, so if you were trying to carve out a time block on your schedule, that is probably where it will live. For 2 hours, 8:00 Thursday night. We fully expect to get approved, but, like we said, we don't really know. So when that happens, we will let you guys know via Twitter and Facebook. So we're keeping an eye on that excitement. And Craig and I, of course, will be at Gen Con, along with the Geek Nation Tours folks and everything else happening as usual. So we're very excited about that. Anything else we want to announce there, Craig or Dean, before we jump on to achievements?
Well, there's a big Ulysses Spiel, which is the German company that owns Torg Eternity, and another popular long-running fantasy game called The Dark Eye, which is kind of the German version of D&D. Pretty much, it's not Dungeons and Dragons, but it's their own game. But it's almost 30 years old or more. But anyways, we are going to be holding a big announcement party at Origins on Thursday night at 8 p.m. It's going to be a big product line that I think will be of interest to D6 Generation listeners. Ooh. And it will be at the Three-Legged Mare, and Ross Watson is heading it up.
Uh-oh.
That is super exciting. That is super
Ross
exciting.
Watson.
Yeah, so if you enjoy three-legged horses, that's the place to go. That's excellent. What's really exciting?
It's a role-playing game where every player has to play a three-legged horse.
Ooh, yeah. I don't want. How does
That's what I think
that would
it
be?
is. I think
it's kind of like that variant on the new My Little Pony RPG.
Right. It's exactly that. It probably uses the same engine. That's what I
probably. Yes, I would imagine so. Just make sure you get your cutie marks right. That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't let your cutie mark get stolen before you register it. That'd be awkward. Very cool. Very cool. Anything else, Dean? Before we go on to achievements?
Yeah, I've got some stuff for you guys to give away.
What? Free stuff to give away? Oh, this is excellent. All right, Dean. So we need a contest. So what are you considering giving away to our listeners?
All right, so we are going to give away the GM kit for Torg Eternity, which basically gives you everything that you need to play Torg, and including the rulebook, the dice, the drama deck, and everything else that you just need with it.
Nice.
And also, in the Kickstarter, we have a cargo box that will include, once the Kickstarter's over, every physical product that we have in the Kickstarter or in any of the stretch goals, except the minis that are now up on the Kickstarter. But that is already over a $200 value.
Wow, that is super cool. Really cool. So do you guys want to do a Twitter contest, Dean? Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Excellent. So what do you think what should we have folks who would like to enter the contest tweet? Should we ask them to maybe some crazy worlds that might appear in Torg or something like that? Yeah,
so tweet your idea of a mashup between 2 or 3 genres for a game, and a name for that mashup, as if it is a new universe that might invade somebody's world.
Very cool.
And if you include the hashtag D6G Pick Me and hashtag Torg Eternity, that would be a good idea too.
Then we'll be able to find you.
That's right.
Yes.
So that's right. So hashtag D6G Pick Me, and of course hashtag Torg Eternity, so people know what we're talking about. And then you don't have a lot of letters, so you got to be concise. You got to capture the essence of your mashup in very few characters, right? So so make that happen. I think you guys, we have very creative listeners, Dean. I have no doubt that they will have some very creative ideas.
We'll have some really freaky cosms coming out of this one.
Now, when should we have the deadline for this, Dean? And then we'll search the Twitter and see what our results should be. You want to do
probably the 1st of June? Is that too?
Well, 1st of June would have been last week, so that would be tricky. But how about
sorry,
1st of July.
Back to the time travel.
Well, it is time travel, so hopefully you've already tweeted this last month and we're fine.
Let's go with Canada Day though. Then July 1st.
July 1st. All right. So July 1st, we will look through the tweets that have the hashtag D6G Pick Me and Torg Eternity, and then Dean will let us know his favorite. Right? Our favorite 2. Are we giving away 2, Dean?
Yeah, we're going to give away 2.
Excellent. So Dean, you'll pick 2 favorites, and then we'll tweet out the winners, and we'll get those addresses to Dean through Twitter Messenger so that we can go ahead and get those sent out to you. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Dean. Please thank everyone over there at Torg Eternity for that great prize pack. That is
super
fantastic.
Cool.
And if you are any doubt that this is an awesome deal, head on over to the Kickstarter and
check it out.
Check for Torg, because you will be impressed with the quality, the art, and all the cool hotness that is coming with Torg Eternity. It looks really fun.
Check out Cargo Box and tell me that's not worth 140 some odd characters worth of effort.
Right, exactly. Brevity is the soul of wit, Craig. It is not easy to tweet a concept, concisely.
Somebody famous said
especially
that.
Since we're going to be sucking up like almost half your tweet and hashtags. So
yeah, that's true.
It gets really hard after that point.
Yeah,
So guys, what have you been playing lately? What analog games, if you will, have been playing, Dean? What have you been
guess
playing?
that would mean it's time for
Achievements in Gaming.
It is indeed. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
So, Dean,
Russ is getting old.
I'm so excited about winning the Cargo Box. I'm sad that I'm not eligible. This is awesome.
Great.
So, Dean, what have you been playing lately?
Well, unfortunately, my Friday night game group came to an end after 13 years.
Oh my goodness!
So
that's a negative achievement. Oh no!
Yeah, life kind of happened with bad things and good things, but we had a good run. I mean, not very many gaming groups go for 13 years, so
that is a good haul, Dean.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
But in the meantime, my wife, my 8-year-old, and I have been playing Pandemic Legacy.
Oh, how are you enjoying that?
That game is amazing.
Isn't it fun? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so good.
I had a real hard time getting Pandemic until probably the first couple of play sessions through that. I played a bunch on the iPad app. But, boy, they added some stuff to this game that... I mean, I won't give any spoilers, but an event happens in the first month of January that you just go like, wow, okay, it's going to be that kind of game.
So we're going here now, are we?
Yeah, we're going there.
That's excellent. Yeah, I have not played. So I'm loving the Legacy games. I'm playing too. I'll talk about, but everybody raves that Pandemic Legacy is the best of the Legacy series. So so not surprised.
I've heard that I think Board Game Geek rates it as the best board game of all time right now. I heard
it's up there for sure. Yeah. Now you want me to go check, but anyway. So what else you playing?
Another game that I played recently, I picked that up at a game store in Vancouver. It's called Planetarium, and Game Salute publishes that.
Oh, nice.
And I guess it was kickstarted a year or two ago. And basically, this game is a game where you create a solar system by smashing rocks together. Sort of.
Nothing to hate there.
No, how could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, and basically, you're just trying to get planets to evolve according to the final cards, the goal cards that you pick up as the game goes on, and you compete with the other players because a lot of these planets have certain requirements, like they might need to be habitable, they might need to be in a close orbit or a far orbit, or one that you could actually get life on it, and stuff like that. And it's a pretty cool game for somebody who's interested in astronomy or something like that.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
That's cool. Hey, I just checked on Pandemic Legacy. It's not the best game of all time on Board Game Geek, but it is definitely up there. It's in the top 10 or so. Just FYI.
Okay.
It's still doing very well, which is good because those games over time they tend to go down, after they're right out, but it's still doing well. Yeah.
Reminds me of the good old days when we reviewed Pandemic.
It does.
Yeah.
No, we didn't.
No, that hasn't happened
No.
yet.
Oh, sorry. That must have been in a different time stream. But
you've gone into the future, Craig, and at that time that we're going to do it.
That's right.
Yeah. Excellent. So great. So we'll Planetarium. So you're liking it, huh? That's awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's a little random. Yeah. One of my friends that we played with it was sort of like he wasn't sure he really liked it because there was a little bit too much randomness. But it was our first game, so it could be one of those games where if you play it quite a bit, you know what the cards are, and you can sort of try to get in your opponent's way a little bit easier. And that's it for me.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Dean. Well, Craig, what have you been playing lately?
Well, Russ, what have I been playing? Well, we played Rune Wars again.
Mm-hmm.
So I always enjoy when we play games after we review them, because that doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't.
It's usually a very good sign for a game when we continue playing it after we do the review, because the pressure is so great for us to constantly come up with new content that things get left by the wayside. So we played Rune Wars again, had a lot of fun again. Mm-hmm. All of the strengths that we discussed last time. I don't know. The only thing holding me back from loving this game is that aesthetic, and I don't know if it's too cluttered or so. Russ and I had a big discussion whether we were still using the cardboard terrain. Russ is not married to the cardboard terrain. He could use whatever.
I would like.
I want to play with whatever the game is supposed to play with, and of course, I had every intention of tracing the terrain and having 3D models made up, and a bunch of stuff came up, and so I didn't do any of that. So we discussed it and decided, well, we have to paint our models so that the armies are painted, and then we have to play with 3D terrain and then see if the dials and the tokens are as distracting as I found them when we were playing with unpainted armies and just the cardboard terrain. Right. So we and again we had a blast. Although I would have liked to have been able to continue my win streak. I haven't been able to maintain something like that since the early days of Conflict 47. Remember those good old days?
Oh, yes, I do remember those. Yes.
Those are that winning streak. That's probably the best winning streak I've ever had against you. This one sadly ended after I think my third game.
Yes.
Which is of course better than Blood and Plunder, which I think I may have won one game ever against you. Right. But still a blast. And then last night I was able to play a game of Warhammer 40,000 8th edition, which we will discuss later in this episode.
Indeed.
What about you, Russ?
Well, played a game of Seafall with my local group. We are now on our 9th play in Seafall, and we are loving it. In fact, a super cool unlock happened in the game that I never would have thought of. Just a really innovative, cool idea that I am absolutely not going to spoil.
Yeah, don't do that.
It totally changed, how you look at all these advisors. So the game has these advisors, this deck of cards of guys that you can hire to work with you each game. And when you hire an advisor, you name them, right? So you write right on the card his or her name. And you do this throughout the game, and these advisors keep coming back to you from game to game and session to session, and now you've named them. So look, there's Harry Potter. Remember when I do the scar on his forehead? Yeah, that's him. And remember there's Indiana Jones, whatever you're naming them. And as you unlock more boxes, more of these sort of advisors show up, right? But now something has happened, so all these advisors and you think you know how they work and everything, something just changed. It's like, what the? Really in a cool way that I just did not expect. So really cool. Still loving Seafall. I am loving it. And what's funny about this is I know there's a lot of negative press around it, but what's interesting is those folks who have played as far as we have now, so, past game like, say, 7, those folks still love it. And that's probably because, at that point, if you hated it, you stopped.
Yeah, it's going to, exactly.
But those who keep playing it really, really like it. So I don't know. Maybe we're weird, but we really enjoy it. Also, as Craig mentioned...
You are kind of weird.
We are weird. As Craig mentioned, played another game of Rune Wars. I was so inspired, I went out and I'm aggressively painting my army. So my goal has been... So after the last game, I had not even assembled or put together or even unboxed my Rune Wars, the one we got for free at Adepticon. At the last game that Craig and I played, I bought another box of Rune Wars stuff. And then since that game, so inside of a week, I have assembled both boxes. I also picked up the box.
All of the forces, or just the Dakan Lords?
Just the good guys. Just the cool people.
Good guys is such a judgmental term. It makes the whole thing into this binary arrangement where you're being all judgmental. I don't like it. Yes. I don't like it.
So the knights, I did all of the spearmen, every good guy that was in the 2 boxes, plus
here we
knights,
go again.
Plus I picked up an expansion that added the 4. I don't know what to call them. Not really heroes. The
command. They're
command. Yeah, thank you. So the standard bearer, a musician, a drummer, or a trumpet guy in this case, a mage, and a sort of a sergeant or fighting dude, lieutenant or whatever. So I got those guys, and all those guys assembled them and then began to airbrush the heck out of them and more about that in modeling. But really excited about this game. And the more I play the models, the more I fall in love with it. So I'm looking forward to the new factions coming out this fall. Also played. So went camping with the family, and we set up in the tent a gaming area. So we played Alhambra in the tent on one of those little camping cots right next to the river there up in the White Mountains. And then after that, we played Risk Legacy and had another game of Risk Legacy, and I got my first victory. So as I've been talking about Risk Legacy, we're on game 8 of Risk Legacy as the family, and my youngest daughter has won most of them. And everybody has won one except for myself. And you record right on the board, you write down who won. So I've never won a game of Risk Legacy with my family. And it's pretty much because my youngest daughter always gets an alliance going with my wife, and my oldest daughter sort of does her own thing. And so right as we were about to play, Rose looked at me, my oldest daughter, and said, unless you and I work together, Kit, my youngest daughter, will win again. That is just going to happen. So finally she got to the metagame. So she and I had an alliance right from the beginning, and it was the only way I was able to score a victory, and I got to win. So now I don't know if that's going to be able to continue, if I'm going to be able to have the alliance, or if it's going to be like, well, Dad's got his one, that's it. But it was a lot of fun.
That would be awesome.
That would probably be what's going to happen here. But I had a lot of fun with that. Still loving Risk Legacy. I love the new factions that show up. It's really fun. So that was that. What about modeling, Dean? You built anything lately?
Not really, not for any games, but I've been working with my son, who's 8 years old, and he's on a little bit of a World War II kick lately. And actually, just as a side note, he was huge into the Titanic.
Very nice, yeah.
So that last episode, Craig, I looked back.
You were right there with me.
Yeah, and I said, he's talking about you. But anyway, so we've been working on a 1 to 1200 scale model of the Japanese battleship Yamato.
Wait. Is it this one?
Cool.
Is it this Yamato?
3, 2,
not the spaceship
1.
Yamato.
Fire!
Does it make this noise? Oh. It doesn't have
no big giant hole in the front.
There's no wave motion.
No.
There it is. Oh, there's the wave motion gun noise. Oh, yeah. That's the stuff. So there's none of that in your model? No. Oh. But it's the actual World War II model, then, not the one they then flew into space.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's still cool.
Yes.
So is he doing most of the work, or are you doing most of the work?
I am helping him because it's super glue now. So, but he is doing almost all of the work so far.
Oh, very cool. That's nice. That's fun. That's great. I used to put my models together all the time, World War II models with my dad. So that's really cool. That's cool that you're bringing him that part of the hobby. Now, is he going to paint it and everything too, or are we just doing assembly?
I think he's going to paint it.
Oh, nice.
But sooner or later, I think we will end up playing Flames of War, because he's been bugging me about that game too.
Oh, nice. That's a good choice if he's a history buff, especially World War II. That'd be great.
Yeah, very
cool. How about yourself, Craig?
Oh well, Russ.
Oh, I feel an epic amount of modeling coming on people. Just grab a beverage.
Yeah, well, I'll warn you. Well, Russ threw down the gauntlet by going, well, Nicole's away for the weekend on work, so I'm going to paint an entire Rune Wars army. So I thought, I can't be one-upped by Russ. So,
oh, my God. Here we go.
I had the 2 boxed sets, and they were already assembled. So, I'm not going to take any, stolen glory here. They were already, not only were they all assembled, they were all also primed.
Yeah, right.
In a very vague sense of zenithal priming, where you do it a darker color and then you do a lighter color over it. I did not do it correctly. I just found out because I stumbled upon the right way to do it on my own, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So we're talking about 2 units of 8 stands of skeleton infantry, the reanimates, and 2 units of 2 trays of archers, and 2 gross carrion worm riders, and the champion. I mean the general. And I also had the 4 command models. So it's a banner and a drummer and a wizard and a champion.
Right.
And I painted them all, and I based them all, and I flocked them all, and I tufted them all.
Nice.
So everything, including the trays and everything, is done. And I went back to a video that was actually put out by the guy who did the studio armies for Fantasy Flight. I can't remember his name, but it should be relatively easy to find. And he shows exactly what he used to do the bases, and he used it might have been armory. He used a very specific, for clearly a product made for games, and none of the game stores around us have that depth of painting supplies. Right. Adler Hobby might have it. Nobody else did, and I hadn't. No, Adler Hobby wasn't open again yet when I was looking for this. So I went to a train and historical modeling store, and Tamiya makes the same thing, and it's textured paint but for models. Yep. And it comes in a big can. I think it costs like $14 for a big bottle, and it paints right onto the base, and it looks like you sanded the base. And even better, it's already dark brown, so you don't have to go paint. So I was able to do textured paint, the same paint on the models' bases and on the trays, so it all blends together, and then didn't have to go back and paint it again. So there was no danger of my getting paint on the on the edges, which I kept black, so that everything would fit together whenever I wanted to, rearrange where the trays were. And then all I had to do was do a quick 2 levels of dry brushing and some flocking and some tufts, and I've got my entire army all set and ready to go, and I think they came out great. I have to say, Russ, I think the quality of these models, we've said they were good all along. Now, having painted them all up, they're fantastic.
I agree. I've fallen in love with my models painting them. I really, looking at them, I was like, these are pretty good. And what's funny was, when we were playing last game, even when we were using your 2 sets and you had just primed them and assembled them, and someone came up to us and was like, are those Mantic miniatures you're using with Rune Wars rules? Like people thought they were Mantic because they were that, they really don't look like board. They look like really high quality miniature game.
They're army game. It's a war game.
It's war game
collection
quality.
Of models.
It's the same quality you find in. It's just like X-Wing, except not pre-painted, right? But I mean, X-Wing's got that level of quality. Like, these are some of the best models you've ever seen. Like, they're there, which is great.
It's not the same. I don't want to give the wrong idea, though. It's not the same. The X-Wing is very much the hard plastic that most war game minis are made out of. These are still kind of a softer plastic.
That's true. I have a little bendy issues with some of my spears.
Yeah, there's some bendy issues and stuff like that. But the actual detail of the models is beautiful. The skeleton faces are a little anime-ish. So if you're looking for like realistic crawled out of the grave skeletons, these aren't going to be it. But every one of the skeletons in their eyes have little ball like eyeballs that are deep set in the sockets and super easy to paint up so that they look like they've got like a little spark of malignant life in each one. I really loved them. I think they look great. I can't wait to get them on the table next week.
You guys
so there was that.
They came out awesome too. So check out our Facebook page and Twitter.
Oh, the Facebook page is I've been Facebooking a lot lately. So
there you go.
The impetus for me to finish the Rune Wars minis was that Games Workshop, who has been very nice, and their outreach, their community outreach has been awesome for about a year now. They've sent us a lot of stuff. They've sent us the Age of Sigmar starter with the General's Handbook. They sent us a set of a Blood Bowl set. It was stuff that we had already looked at, not really, so it's all, it's kind of piling up in my house. But now I'm going to give it away
or something at Gen Con.
Really amazing stuff, but they asked if we wanted Warhammer 40,000, and I was like, oh my God, I want Warhammer 40,000. And so they had sent it, and I got it the day that the pre-orders went up. So that was awesome. So the day the pre-orders went up, I actually got the box in my hand, and I didn't get anything else, which is, our local friend Matt, who is one of the hosts of
40K Radio.
Somebody in a wind tunnel?
Justine's got a layer. That's okay. But yeah, it's 40K Radio, I believe you're talking about.
Sorry. Okay. Oh, that's good radio.
Right.
Me talking about it. Okay. Anyway. So he's 40K Radio host. So he got all the indexes and everything. I got a chance to look at them a little bit. Other local stores have them out now. For instance, the comic store locally. If your store spends enough money on Games Workshop, they have sent them the starter box, which is called the Dark Imperium starter box for Warhammer 40,000, and all the indexes, which each index, there's 5 of them in total, and they each break down a whole bunch of the different armies. And there's a god-awful number of armies in Warhammer 40,000 now. It's ridiculous. And every model that GW sells right now is the rules are going to be available on the 17th of June, but you can look at those books early if you want. So we got the box set, and I was like, I don't want to start the box until I finish the Rune Wars. So I finished the Rune Wars, then I put together, and we'll talk about this some more when we talk about the 40K in the next segment. But there are a lot of models in that box, so that was super fun. I put together and Zenithal primed both forces, and I gotta say the trick is to go with a darker color underneath and then do a really solid the actual prime color that you want to prime them, like with Army Builder or something, almost solid, but you're leaving the recesses that darker color, and that really gives a nice shaded effect to the point where the gross bloated Death Guard guys look like they're half painted already, which is great. On top of that, I finished painting the generators for the terrain, the Adeptus Mechanicus terrain, including I did sourced lighting on the electrical coils, which was really cool. I painted up all the construction vehicles, Russ, that you saw the last time I was setting up for Shadow Wars. So I love those. I did those in like a construction yellow, but they're all grimy and gross. I really like the way they came out. I threw together a piece of industrial terrain using a bunch of different stuff. I painted that up. I actually have started using sponging, which is a technique that a lot of people have been using lately to do rust and wear and tear on vehicles and other artificial surfaces. And I used it for the first time on that piece. I had hazard striping going all the way around the base of this 6-inch by 6-inch piece. And then I used sponging with the same metal color that I painted the base, and it actually looks like the hazard striping is all chipped off. It looks really cool. And then I got the Void Shield generator terrain piece, which is really expensive and probably not worth how much money it is because it doesn't take up that much space on the table. But I built that, and I have just finished Zenithal priming that and the pipe set. So I've been very, very busy over the last 2 weeks.
Wow, Craig, that's insane, dude. I don't even know how you do all that. Well, I was all excited because I did.
I was sick. That's what I did. I was sick at home for 2 days straight.
Okay. Yep. That's what you told everybody. All right, cool. Well, I did not do quite that much, but I did do an army. As I mentioned earlier, I did the Rune Wars, the 2 sets plus the command. Now, what I would try to do with this was I tried to do as much with the airbrush as I could. And so that was how I was got to get through so much. So when you see pictures of these guys, and they're on Twitter and Facebook, and more coming the end of this week, I did their faces, their armor, their cloaks and their shields. All of that was done with airbrush. And then that got through, that went really fast, and that got through pretty much the main parts of the army. It looked pretty good. And there was a 2-tone blue that came out of the shields kind of by accident that I was really pleased with. And then I just used the brushes for the hasps of their spears, their gloves, and then I just inked the spears, the gloves, and the faces, and that was it. And it goes to how the quality of these models, because people were commenting like, wow, your leatherwork looks amazing. I'm like, all I did was paint them brown and ink them. But because there's so much great detail and folds and everything in these models, even on the gloves, they really jump out. It looks great. So I was really, I think the models look good because the detail's really there. And so techniques like inking and dry brushing and airbrushing work really, really well in these guys. So I'm really impressed with the models, much more so. I just had such a fun time putting them together and painting them. So really, really pleased. Although I did develop what I think is a thing, airbrush index finger. So the way you have to hold the little thing on the airbrush, if you do too long, like I think one day I was airbrushing for 2 hours straight. And by the end, I'm like, man, my finger's getting, stiff. I should probably take a break. So really pleased. I had a lot of fun with that, and just can't wait to get them back on the table again. Good stuff. So what about other geeky goodness, Dean? What about movies, TV shows, books? What else you reading and watching there?
Well, my wife and I have been catching up on some shows on streaming that we've sort of stopped watching to watch other shows, and we want to finish them off. And the one we're going through right now is Person of Interest.
Ooh, how you liking that?
Well, we liked it. We really liked it when it was out, and then we stopped watching it after season 3, and now we're on season 4, and it's still really good. It's a little bit scary in a way, but if you actually can get computers that are that surveilling. We're really enjoying it.
Yeah. Cool.
As far as computer games go, I've been playing The Witcher, the first one. Got that through goodoldgames.com.
Oh, nice.
For like $3, and I think I've played 70 hours on it now so far,
that's
and
long.
I think I'm halfway done.
Now, have you played the most recent Witcher? Are you going backwards, or are you starting from the beginning forward?
I'm starting from the beginning.
Wow, okay.
There you go.
Yeah. So, that's a long game. So I took a break, and one of the games I played on that break is a game called Life is Strange. Have you guys heard of this one?
No, I have not.
No.
All right. So, anyways, this game, I have never played another video game that's impacted me emotionally as much as this one did.
Oh, wow.
And I loved Mass Effect 2, and I loved Heavy Rain, even though it was, all the feels on that one. Mm-hmm. And if there is a game that puts false the statement that Roger Ebert said that video games are not art, this is one that just shows he's totally wrong on that. And it's a game that's tough to tell people about because it's one of those that the less you know about the game, the better it is when you play it.
Okay.
But basically, it's sort of your typical teen soap, so like One Tree Hill or something like that. But combine it with the Telltale Walking Dead style games and add time travel.
Oh, wow.
And that's basically what the game part is. But the story of that you go through in Life is Strange is amazing. It is definitely not for everyone. It is very mature subject matter. So if you're somebody who might have things that would cause you problems if you were exposed to it, or if you have even teens, I'd be hesitant about having them play this until they're like 17 or 18 at least. Because it goes into some dark places that games don't usually cover, but it does it amazingly well, and the voice acting is amazing. One of the main characters is voiced by Ashley Birch, who did the voice of Aloy, who is the main character in Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, she was great in Zero Dawn. She did a really good job.
Yeah, and so basically what my recommendation is you play the first episode, which I think is free on Steam.
Yeah.
And then play the second episode, and if you like it, you keep going because it gets better. If you don't like it, stop because it gets worse.
So it's like if you don't like it, you're really not going to like it, and if you like it, you're really going to love it. Is basically what you're saying.
Exactly. And it's funny. I went on to Reddit once I was finished playing this, and there's a community on there of people who have played this game, and there's actually something called Life is Strange Depression Syndrome, because for about a week after that, you feel sad because you'll never get to play that game for the first time again.
Oh, interesting. I want to check it out.
Yeah,
it's available on all platforms, right? I think it's a PS4, Xbox, One, and Steam thing, right?
Yeah, I think it is. I cannot recommend it enough.
Okay, well, now I want to check that out. Well, good one, Dean. Cool.
Something
so new.
What about you, Craig?
What about me, Russ? Let's see. I'm continuing to listen to Wastelands, which is book 3 in the Dark Tower series, and I'm still really enjoying it. They finally got to the train, so now I get when everybody's like, oh, the train one. Yeah, okay, so I'm at the train one.
Laying the train.
Still enjoying that. So I was brutally ill, and I took the opportunity to binge. I thought, you know what? I know I'm gonna be out for at least 2 days. That's how sick I am. I'm gonna binge watch something. And I realized that I had fallen so far behind House of Cards and hadn't watched for 2 seasons. And so I caught up to House of Cards, and it was super interesting and cool. And then I'm 90% sure we've just jumped the shark in the latest season. So that was disappointing.
Shark's approaching.
And there was definitely...
I made it through 2 seasons before I was like, okay, I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah, I was like 2.5 through when I stopped watching it the last time. So I just watched basically almost 2.5 seasons in the last 5 days, and now I'm just like, okay, so yeah, I don't think anymore.
Have you ever watched the British one?
No, I didn't know there was a British one.
Yeah, that's what this is based on.
There's always a British one, Craig. Come on.
There is always a British one. I should know that.
It's a lot shorter too. I think it's only 3 episodes for the first season.
Oh wow.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a British show. And then I've been doing a lot of reading of Warhammer 40,000 8th edition books. But again, more on that later. What about you, Russ?
Well, let's see. I saw Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. All right, so let me just say, these movies are getting, they get panned. And quite frankly, the Mermaids pirate movie, which is the less said about that, the better. Although, here's my family's take on this. So my girls all wanted to go see this, and I was surprised because I said, look, what are we going to go see this weekend, Wonder Woman or Pirates? Now, we all really want to see Wonder Woman, but the kids are like, Pirates! And I was surprised because they'd probably want to see Wonder Woman, but my daughters are where I am on this thing. It doesn't matter what the story is. As long as Johnny Depp's got airtime being Captain Jack Sparrow, it doesn't really matter what actually happens anywhere else. And it was just, you know what it's like? It's like this movie, they really embrace the fact that essentially this is like James Bond meets Pirates. What I mean by that is most of the great James Bonds are stupid silly. Like any of the Pierce Brosnan or Rosamore James Bonds, they're just like crazy. Things that are happening in there are not realistic. They don't even make sense. But it doesn't matter because James Bond doing cool stuff. And that's kind of where Jack, right from the opening, the let's just call it the bank robbing scene, that is just great. It's just great. It doesn't matter that it's completely unrealistic and silly. It's awesome. So we loved every moment of the Pirates movie and thought it got back to its roots of silly, good fun. And the ending was even a little heartwarming. So we really enjoyed Pirates. And I know it's got a Metacritic score of like 35 or some ridiculously bad number. It doesn't matter. It's Pirates. And we liked it. So,
good.
Somebody had to like it in order to be 35, right?
Right.
That's
and
true.
I'm that person.
35%.
My family is that person. We are excited to go see Wonder Woman this weekend, though, because I know it's getting great reviews. But so anyway, so did that. Also, in the reading department, I finished Rookie Privateer. I may have mentioned this last time. It is a really fun little light sci-fi book. Now talk about hard sci-fi, Craig. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but it tells the story of a young lad who is on a mining asteroid with his dad, and how he goes from that to becoming sort of a privateer, right?
Okay.
And what's interesting about this is it's such hard sci-fi that he's trying to fix his first ship, right? And they literally spend, it might be a chapter on plumbing. Like, literally how he's fixing the plumbing. And he makes it interesting. Now, maybe it's because, I'm an engineer and I find these crazy. But, like, nobody ever even mentions there's a bathroom on a spaceship. Never mind how it actually works. And so it was kind of fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a total nerd, but I really enjoyed this book. And it has some fun in it too. It's light. It's a young adult kind of book.
It's a light space plumbing book.
It's a light space plumbing book, right? So if you enjoy a good book that requires a little bit of plumber's putty, you will like this book. So then finishing that, I'm moving back on. My youngest daughter's been blasting through Dresden Files, and I have to say I petered out around book 9 just because I got distracted by some of the new hotness. And I haven't been back to Dresden for book 10 or later, which puts me like 5 years behind or some silly number. Yeah. And my youngest daughter's like, Dad, you got to read more Dresden. I'm all caught up, and I got to talk to you about it. So I'm like, so I'm back into it, and I'm really loving it again. I think the thing with Dresden is the story's sort of, I would say they repeat, but the plot arc is very similar in every Dresden book.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to take a break, but having back, it's like returning to an old friend. So now I'm like, I haven't read it in a few years. This is great, and so I'm really enjoying. Small Favors is the Dresden book I'm currently listening.
Yeah, he's taking a really long time to finish the new one.
Yeah.
And there's rumors that he's actually somehow, or there might be a TV series.
Yeah, well, there was a TV series.
Another one?
He might be working on the scripts.
I've heard this because the old one is on Netflix now, and it was not. We watched it when it came out, and it wasn't a really good treatment. It wasn't bad.
No. It wasn't really Dresden.
No, it wasn't really Dresden. And I think what they're doing, my understanding is Netflix picked it up, and it's going to be more true to Butcher's version of Dresden.
Netflix.
Which could be good. So this is the rumor.
Could we love Netflix anymore? That's the question.
Right. Well,
Netflix.
Yeah. So
they're doing a great job with a whole bunch of
They are.
things.
And actually, speaking of them, I wanted to mention that I'm watching 2 other shows on Netflix right now. So I'm watching, my daughters are like, so whenever my wife travels, which is quite a bit because she's a journalist, when she's out traveling, the kids and I will watch some show that she's not interested in. And so right now we're watching Merlin. So my oldest daughter found Merlin a while ago. And this show is pretty mediocre, but it's kind of funny. So we're enjoying that. But I'm really enjoying, speaking of Netflix doing a good job, have you guys watched the new MST3K on Netflix?
No.
I have not. I have never been into.
Oh, see, well, I like the old Mystery Science Theater, the stuff from the 90s. I used to watch it all the time. And so the new one stars Felicia Day and some other folks, doing the stuff. And I really, really am enjoying it. The first one I watched, I was kind of like, oh, it's okay. But as they find their stride at some point. And they really pick some really doozies of movies, which is part of the magic of it. But they nailed it. It really by episode 3 or 4, you're really feeling like it's old MS-33K just back again with more episodes. So I think Netflix really nailed, the air quotes formula for Mystery Science Theater 3000. I'm really enjoying it there. So if you have not given it a try yet, do. And I would say, there's no reason to watch them in any kind of order. So you might even jump to episode 2 or 3 just to kind of get them when they're in their stride, and then go back and pick up one because their timing and everything gets a little better as they go on. So really enjoyed that. So, is that achievements, gentlemen?
I think it is.
That is achievement.
There we go.
In a world where board gaming was king, in a time when Kickstarter ruled the web, when every day brought more and more games, now, more than ever, 2 men, and a revolving third chair, and a girl, a total fangirl, brought a shining light into the darkness so that all mankind would know what to buy. They are the D6 generation.
Hey, now it's time to talk about our friends at Battle Foam. Craig, what's amazing about Battle Foam is they're always on the cutting edge. Pardon the pun.
Ooh,
on the
what you did there.
laser cutting edge.
The laser cutting edge.
Like, for example, let's say you're all excited about the new Warhammer 40,000 8th edition, right? And you're like, man, that game is so hot. I'm getting the new box here, and I'm going to get all those great models in that box. And how am I going to carry them? Well, don't worry. You go to Battle Foam right on their front page. They've already got the foam for the new set. Boom, right out of the hopper, ready to go. Get that rocking. And that's what's amazing about Battle Foam, Craig, is they always are on the cutting edge of what's new, what's hot. They've got custom foam for all your needs and the cases to carry it in, right?
Yeah, and now you've got a whole new set of bags, Russ, the ammo box bags for armies, and one of them's even camouflage color.
Right.
It's that big giant pockets for huge rule books, like this new 40K rule book, for instance, right. And a lot of space and all the Molly straps and everything. Yeah. Awesome, cool stuff.
Great stuff. And again, you want to get your stuff around. You got all the choices of Battle Foam. The nice soft-sided bags, a little more affordable, great pockets on them. You want the hard-sided bags so you can throw it in the airplane and not worry about it. They got those too. You want to run over your bag with a truck just to say you did it. You can do that also, and your models are going to get there safe and sound. And my personal favorite,
make sure you only run over the right ones.
Right, double check that. But my favorite part is really the fact that I can get the custom foam the way I want it, in the sizes I need them for all my crazy board games, miniature games, you name it, they've got it. Head on over to battlefoam.com.
Hooah!
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present...
Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep.
Seriously, Wakeland? I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pat...
Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey everyone, welcome to another App of the Ep. This time around, I don't think I can talk about anything besides the big E3 stuff happening. So I haven't had a chance to watch Sony yet. So I am now console agnostic, meaning I have both a PlayStation and an Xbox. I play both. So now I don't have a preference necessarily. I just look for the cool games. And so I watched Microsoft's, although, well, I say I don't have a preference. I generally still lean towards the Xbox version just because I have all my achievements there. I actually have a couple Xboxes, so the kids and I can play the games together. And I do like the controllers better, and for some reason I'm just used to the ecosystem. It's more of a usage thing than I won't claim it's better. It's just what I'm used to. So I do lean towards Microsoft, so I was watching their press conference first. Didn't get a chance to watch Sony's yet. I'm looking forward to that, though. But... oh, and for those interested, I don't actually track Nintendo just because I was a Nintendo fan. I had an NES back in the day when it came out with a robot and a light gun and everything, and I was a big Zelda fan from the gold cartridge and all that stuff. But I never really, their games were good, but I never really stuck with them as like some kind of nostalgia thing. So I don't really follow Nintendo much anymore. But in any case, so I watched the Microsoft E3 announcement. I was really excited to hear what Project Scorpio is going to be. I watched it with my daughters last night, and so I'll share their reactions too. And initially we were kind of like, really? Xbox One X? I mean, it's kind of a pretty weak sauce name. How about just the Xbox X or the Xbox, which they've already done, I guess. So doesn't really work. Maybe just drop one and call it the Xbox again. I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was a terrible name. But Scorpio I kind of liked. Xbox Scorpio would have been good. Any case, not a big deal. The good news is the power looks awesome. Really excited to see dedicated 4K at 60 frames per second. I do have a PS4 Pro, so I've played some of the newer games like Horizon Zero Dawn and Uncharted with the 4K versions of those on a 4K TV. Really impressed with that, and I do notice missing it when I play on the Xbox One. I don't have an S. I just have an Xbox One. I noticed missing that, so I'm looking forward to really seeing it fully powered, 60 frames per second, all done up for the newer games. Also excited to see the backward compatibility. One of the things I was really sad about when we did the 360 was lack of backward compatibility of the Xbox One. They eventually brought that, and when the one came out, they didn't have 360. Now they're having it right out of the gate. And all these new games run on all the Xboxes, whether it's an Xbox One, an Xbox One S, or an Xbox X. All these games are going to run on it, which is interesting. I'm curious to see how they pull that off. So excited about that. As far as the games go, also excited that the hardware is all compatible. So all your current controllers still work with the X. That's sweet as well. So actually, it's interesting. It's really more of an iteration, but it's a very powerful iteration. I mean, holy cow, the specs on that thing are pretty crazy. But anyway, so we're excited about that. Excited it's coming out when it is. So it's right around my birthday. So I'm excited about that opportunity. Now coming up, there's the games really, right? And I'm not even worried now at this point, like what's an Xbox One X game or not, because all the games run on all the platforms. It's just what's going to look really cool on the fancier version. So the kids and I really psyched about the new Assassin's Creed. The preview for the Assassin's Creed game, based in Egypt now, looks amazing, and sort of the idea of the bird being sort of like a familiar, and you can see through his eyes. That looks awesome. Loved everything about that. Fighting with a sword and shield looks really cool. So yeah, Assassin's Creed, I think it's called Origins, looked really, really good. We're really excited about that. We were really excited about the pirate game. What's the name of it now? I can't remember the name of it. It's the one, Microsoft's doing it. It's got, you go with your friends and you all crew the ship together, and then you can jump off the ship and fire yourself in a cannon. Oh, man, I'm totally blanking on the game now. Name I forget. But I really enjoyed that game. That looks really pretty fun. Sort of silly fun. So that looked pretty good. We were also very excited about, really about everything to do with Anthem. So Anthem, we wanted to really love Anthem. So Anthem is the new game from BioWare. And what's interesting about Anthem is, it is, so we're big fans of BioWare. We just finished the Mass Effect, Andromeda, loved that. Both my daughters and I loved Dragon Age, so really big BioWare fans. And so Anthem looks like BioWare kind of meets Destiny, where you fly in these suits, but the graphics look sick, as does the suit system and the combat. But I can't tell. We like story, so we really like story. So it was hard to tell if this was more of a loot drop thing like Destiny with a little story sprinkled in. I know Destiny's gotten story later, but it took too long to get story, and so we bailed on Destiny. I hope Anthem has more story in it. So I like the idea of Anthem. I just hope it has enough story. And the other game that looked really compelling to us was Metro Exodus. Looked kind of like Far Cry meets, not Far Cry, but Fallout. Looked like Fallout 4 meets like some sort of Russia thing with amazing graphics. Some really impressive ideas going on in that game as well. So look forward to that too. So basically, really a lot. I mean, there were a ton of games in the Microsoft a conference. They had like 44 games they showed, of which 22 were exclusive, so that's really cool. So we were really excited about it. My daughters were really impressed at the end. They're like, wow, most of those games we are really excited for. You have too many games to play now, which is awesome. So really excited about that. So it's going to be a great holiday season for Xbox fans. And next time I will watch the Sony briefing and let you know my thoughts on that. Until then.
Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App, a segment in which,
Hey, less of that. More just getting on with the show.
seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back. And now, since Dean is here on the show, and we established last time that Dean is, how would you describe it, Craig? Mr. RPG? Does that seem fair?
That's definitely in the RPG family.
Definitely.
I guess for you guys.
And
Mr. RPG.
That's right. And last time, Dean, too, you mentioned how much you liked Torg and how influential it was on you in your early RPG days. But now it's super exciting because Torg's back, baby, right? Big Kickstarter happening as we speak.
Yes, it is.
So this is exciting. So we figured since we have you on here, you're one of the key people behind it right now. We thought it would kind of be helpful for our listeners. What the heck is Torg? Why are people so excited about it? Why did it fund nearly instantly at like a gajillion times your ask? I mean, what do you love about Torg? What makes it a great RPG?
Okay, well here's the elevator pitch. Imagine a role-playing game with an adventuring party consisting of John McClane, Harry Potter, Van Helsing, Captain America, Lara Croft, and Jackie Chan.
Nice.
And 1 week they travel to New York to race against Belloc to find treasures in Land of the Lost. The next week they go to Cairo and fight ninjas in the world of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the following week they go to France and fight the Spanish Inquisition in the Matrix. And all three of those settings are in the same world.
Awesome.
All of that made perfect sense except that last one, because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
No one expects. Well, here's the thing that's interesting about the Dean. So there's other RPGs that have the same rule set, and you could put them in different settings, but they expect the characters and the settings to be consistent, and that you're not fighting in the Old West one day, into the far future the next day, and then in medieval times the day after that. But you're saying that Torg is all about pulling people from entirely different universes, packing them together, and then having them go adventure from week to week or even within the same session from universe to universe.
Yeah, it's not just a multi-genre game. It's it's a genre mashup game.
Right.
It's very similar. Well, it's similar to Rifts, which was coming out at the same time back in 1990. Yeah. And actually, there was a little bit of a race between the two games at the time. Torg was created by Greg Gordon and Bill Slavicsek. Mm-hmm. I think I butchered that pronunciation enough. And so anyway, it was one of the first two real genre mashup games. And some funny stories that Torg originally stood for the other role-playing game because they didn't know what to call it. And so West End Games finally decided to just call it that.
And the other compared to Rifts, or the other compared to Dungeons and Dragons?
I think it was the other game that they were making in-house because they were running like Traveler 2300.
Oh, yes, right.
But wait a minute, no, Star Wars they were running.
Oh, okay, neat. So it was basically their code name was the other role-playing game, and it sort of stuck and became an acronym.
Yes.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah, and so anyways, the game was basically published from about 1990 to 94. Mm-hmm. And it's very typical of the games from that era. It's very crunchy and lots of different subsystems for rules and stuff like that. And there were some big innovations, though, for that game. One of them was it was one of the first games to popularize things like bennies, so points that the players could spend to improve the chances of succeeding at stuff at their choice. They weren't the first one. I think that was Ghostbusters, but they were one of the ones who made it sort of big time. The other one that a lot of that really still is almost unique is using a card deck as a integral part of the game, but it's not for everything. You still roll a D20. In fact, they had a really cool red and blue model D20 that really you couldn't get until, well, now again, with the Kickstarter, we're able to bring those back again. But I actually tried to find more. But they actually had a real hard time getting a company to actually make the combination of the two colors together in one die at the time. And the other thing that they did early on was they had something called the Infiniverse. And this was basically an organized play system.
Ooh, wow.
But they could actually change the meta plot. So they would run adventures and they would send out surveys. And this is all through snail mail at the time because it was just before the internet took off. And so they would like say, well, what did you guys do in this adventure? Did you kill this guy? Did you stop this stuff? And they took that information and actually changed the campaign as it went on, because it's this big war that was supposed to last about 5 years.
Wow, that's super innovative, because I don't think I really recall, and Craig, maybe you remember better, but I don't really recall like organized play the way we think of it today back then. I mean, the internet really facilitates that. But back then, there were modules, and there were seasons of modules and short adventures published from mail. But I don't remember like that kind of thing happening. That was really ahead of its time.
Yeah, I think the RPGA network might have done it, but I don't really remember because I wasn't too into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it basically through a lot of through reasons started declining in the mid '90s. And it basically went fallow for quite a long time. There was an attempt at a revision, like they came up with a version 1.5 hardcover book in the early 2000s. But basically, it didn't really. It was basically a dead game for quite a while. And then a German company called Ulysses Spiel purchased the game, and they did that about 7 or 8 years ago. And then we started working on the new edition early 2015. And amazingly enough, I actually got on the design team almost from the beginning, which still blows my mind to this day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, because the funny thing is I got into freelancing to work on Torg. And I was just hoping that maybe I get to do an adventure or part of an adventure and something like that. But I basically just kept bugging them every 6 months. So are you guys rebooting Torg yet? Because I'd like to be in it. And I asked an extra time, and they said, "Yeah, we'll get you in touch with the guy who's the lead designer, who happened to be Shane Hensley." And we'll get into who that is later.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So let's. Well, I want to get all this stuff. So many things to talk about, But let's dive a little deeper, though, into the setting and stuff. You've given us sort of the high level, the history, which is great. But like, if I was a player sitting down with you, Dean, and you were going to run a Torg game for me, what kind of basics would you tell me to kind of get me into the mood and understand what this is going to be like?
Admittedly, one of the problems with Torg is that there's so much to it that there's so many concepts and some terms and stuff like that. It's hard to throw it all at somebody all at once at the beginning. So I almost think that this is a game where you sort of throw them into it without explaining too much ahead of time, and then just sort of add the information as you go on. But that said, the basics is that Earth is being invaded by other realities. And these realities are led by people called High Lords, who are here to steal Earth's possibility energy. And this is basically energy that is created through creativity and stuff like that. Okay. And it just so happens that Core Earth happens to be the universe or cosm that has the most possibility energy anywhere in the what they call the Cosmverse. Got it. And so each of these High Lords is trying to get enough of this energy to eventually become the Torg, which is basically a godlike being, pretty much. And so each reality has its own what are called axioms and world laws. And the axioms are basically numbers that determine what kind of technology or spiritual power or magic spells or psionics can actually work in that reality. So if you were in a low-tech reality, you could try to fire your rifle and it won't work. It just will not be allowed to work.
That's interesting.
Oh.
And same with magic and psionics and stuff like that. It's basically what is allowed to actually function in this reality. And each of the realities has 3 world laws that basically provide mechanics to support the genre that reality is trying to have. And all of these realities end up being on Earth. So geographically, it's all like, Nashua or Washington, D.C. or London, but it's London with dragons fighting, jet aircraft over Buckingham House and stuff like that.
That's really cool. So I can create now. Am I in the worlds that are there, or as a game master, can I create my own worlds and just come up with the laws and go from there?
Oh, sure, you could do that, but we have a group of official realities that were part of the original setting, and we're basically keeping those, but we're tweaking them based on differences from 25, 30
So it's like Forgotten Realms. There's a setting or set of settings I can use, but I also have the ability to go out and make my own up.
Oh yeah, yeah, and lots of people do.
Yeah, right. Cool.
For sure. This is a very fertile area to get creative. Is to invade your world with the reality you want to have in your game. So basically, the Earth is called Core Earth to differentiate from our Earth
from reality,
and it's basically the world of Die Hard. It's action. You get heroes and villains, but there's nothing too unusual about it. There might be some weird things going on, like you might actually have Sasquatches. Or you might actually have some weird magic users doing weird cultist stuff. But generally speaking, it's what we're familiar with.
So superheroes could exist, or is that a different world?
That's a different one.
Okay.
So, in no particular order, we've got Isle, which is the fantasy setting. And it's in there to sort of provide a setting that's familiar to most people, but not Earth. And so if you play D&D, you can be very comfortable in getting an elf or dwarf from Isle and playing it in Torg. With this edition, we're giving it a little bit more of a once upon a time slant to it. There's like light and dark stuff to it and stuff like that. Do you have to play
a bad guy that becomes a good guy, then becomes a bad guy, then becomes a good guy again? Just checking on the once upon a time thing, because that's pretty much every plot in that show. That. Okay, good. Just checking. Just make sure.
So anyways, they invade the British Isles and Scandinavia.
All right.
And so it's high magic. But one of the things we've introduced is dwarves and power armor.
Oh, nice. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Flamethrowers.
Yeah, I love that. Dwarves and power armor should be a thing. And if you ever invent them, you should never retire them. I'm just saying.
No.
Right.
So then you've got in France and Spain, you have the cyber papacy, which is basically the Spanish Inquisition meets cyberpunk.
That is already awesome. That's great. Do they have the comfy chair?
They could, but I don't think you want to be in it.
No, definitely not. Not with the pillows.
But they also have cyber witches. So they have witches and warlocks who have cybernetics in addition to magic spells.
Very cool.
And they have magic spells that affect technology and stuff like that. Then there's the setting I like the most, which is the Nile Empire. And I like it so much that's the Cosm source book I'm actually writing, which still blows my mind.
That's awesome.
But anyways, it is basically pulp heroes meets ancient Egypt meets Nazi Germany. And they've invaded Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and East Africa. And basically it's your realm of Indiana Jones, Lara Croft, The Rocketeer. And the perfect one is the Mummy, the good one.
The good one.
But yeah, I mean, that's almost perfect. The only thing missing from that is a pulp hero. And I'm saying pulp hero for a reason, because they're not really superheroes. These heroes are a little bit less powerful. And Captain America really is probably the most powerful kind of pulp hero you could have.
Right.
But it's from that era. So it's like the 20s and 30s, and the Shadow and Doc Savage and those. Oh,
got it. But it's not steampunk though. It's definitely it's more Indiana Jones type situation.
Yes.
Right.
So sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
All right. So So in addition, it is 1940s technology, but they have weird science gadgets. So they've got like ray guns and force fields and heat rays and stuff like that. Cool. But they're very unique items. They're not. You're not running around with laser beams. You're one guy who has a heat ray and stuff like that.
So it's like Rocketeer, where you'd have jetpacks, even though you shouldn't, and like,
right.
It's a little Flash Gordon kind of flying around and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Then you've got Aurorsh, which is the Gothic horror realm, and they've invaded India. And this is actually a change from the original Torg. Aurorsh invaded Indonesia at the beginning, but we felt it was a little bit more fitting. And also, India is such a great cultural area that it has so much stuff that we can work with in India to really improve sort of the ambiance of that reality. And the leader of Aurorsh is the Gotman, and actually he is basically the guy who got all these other High Lords together and said, let's invade this world because we can't take it individually, but we could take it all at once if everybody combined forces. Of course, everybody's going to backstab everybody else by the end of it, but right now they're all basically behaving themselves, and that's your reality of vampires and werewolves and Wolfman and stuff like that. Then you've got Pan Pacifica, which is corporate espionage meets ninjas meets Resident Evil. And originally this was called Nippon Tech, but Nippon Tech was very much of its time. This was the era of the scare that Japan was going to buy out all this property, and China was not a big player on the world scene, but that's completely changed now. So basically, we've expanded the scope of this realm to include China and South Korea, and we've added a little bit of a interesting mix by adding these what are called Jiangshi, and they're basically like the zombies from Resident Evil or 28 Days Later or something like that. They're zombies that are fast. And one of the neat things about Pan Pacifica is they've got a character archetype called Electric Samurai. And they're basically ninjas with electric katanas, high-tech samurai armor, and fast motorcycles.
Wow, that's awesome.
Good to me.
Yeah, these are awesome combinations. Like they really do get your mind going. Like, oh man, there's so many cool things I can do.
Yeah,
very, very cool.
And so, invading the United States and Canada is the Living Land, and this is basically your primitive Lost World or Land of the Lost setting. So it's got dinosaurs. It's got lizardmen. It's got lizardmen riding dinosaurs. But what is amazing about these lizardmen, they're very low tech. They're not very organized. In fact, in this reality, you actually can forget about the concept of time, at least for like it's 12 o'clock. No, it's when the sun gets to that point in the sky.
Yeah.
And you don't care about much more than your tribe. Because the idea of a country it's contradictory. You don't understand what the country is. But what these lizardmen have is incredible spiritual power. They have miracles that we'll get later on in the campaign, but they have the ability to affect areas the size of cities. And so that's why they're so dangerous to the United States, because the U.S. has this high technology. They've got these excellent social networks, and you've got soldiers who are very disciplined, and you drop this reality on them, and all of those advantages go away. And meanwhile, they're blasting you with the trees around you animate and grab you and rip you apart and stuff like that. Finally, there's Thargold, and they invade Russia. And Thargold's a little bit interesting because in the original campaign, their invasion failed. And they did eventually come back after a couple of years, but they are in the campaign right from the get-go. And one of the things that's different about this edition is that it's not a darker game. It's not grimdark, but it's more desperate. Earth is a lot more in trouble than they were in the original campaign. But anyway, so Thargold is Terminator meets Hellraiser meets Mad Max. Wow. So you've got people with cyber tech and cyberware, but you've got psionics, but it's a post-apocalyptic setting, like hundreds of years ago. Techno-demons invaded another world called Darkhold, and the humans there fought back. And as it turns out, the humans lost. And so the techno-demons have basically enslaved most of the humans, and now they're invading our territory. And one of the interesting things that happens early on in the campaign is that the president of Russia nukes the device that is bringing these people, or these techno-demons people, into Russia. And they temporarily think they've won, but they didn't. But in the meantime, they spread a massive amount of radioactive reality stuff over northern Russia. And now that part of Russia is actually permanently a mix of core Earth and Darkhold at the same time, which is something a little bit weird that we did for this edition.
That's really cool.
Any questions?
Well, it's really cool. So you're basically all these different sort of genres and things are on the same planet Earth. So you're really just essentially traveling from one continent or even country to another, and you're seeing these cool things. Can you also jump into those actual other worlds, or do you stay pretty much on Earth with all these different areas?
Eventually, I think we'll try to support that, but right now we want to focus on the war on Earth.
Oh, cool.
Otherwise, I think we dilute things a little bit too much.
No, I keep it in focus. I like it. I was just curious about that. That's neat.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's so many genres here. I love it. And I love that you can literally... So when you cross the border, like when you go from like the living land to Darkhold or whatever, that's when the laws of physics or reality sort of shift? Like, is it like instantaneous as soon as you cross the street?
Pretty much. And all of these realities are bound. They have a boundary of storms called reality storms. Mm. And these storms can actually transform people directly. And eventually people who are inside these realities will transform to that reality. But while they're doing that, they're getting injected with possibility energy from Earth. Mm-hmm. But these boundaries that are dotted with what are called stellae actually intercept that energy, and they suck that energy out and give it to the High Lord. And so they're accumulating this energy over time, and allows them to do some things. But the idea is that sooner or later, they're going to be powerful enough that they could become Torg. And we haven't specified what that means, but it's very bad.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It sounds like you've got pretty much every combination of awesome themes already covered. Does the core game have rules for making up your own the metaphysics and everything, or is that kind of like left up to you? I don't even know what you would add, because I can't think of a thing that you haven't already got.
Well, I could think of Old Western, some sort of Western thing, like Deadlands.
Right.
Touche.
Deadlands could be.
And
Wuxia? Yep. That, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's like the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I can sort of see something there. But yeah, basically all the basic ones I think are in Torg now.
Right.
But as for making your own, they're pretty much just guidelines. There's no hard rules, just that they all have the 4 axioms. They each have 3 world laws. And we'll get into this later, but in order to really treat them well, they need what are called custom cards designed, because those add a lot to the game. That, in fact, actually, it's probably the coolest new mechanic we've got, I think, for this game. Are those
cool
ones.
Well, let's rush on in.
Yeah. So give us the overview of the mechanics.
Yeah. So mechanics. Now, one of the weird things that people would notice, and I've noticed some people commenting, is that they're saying, "Wow, this looks a lot like Savage Worlds," and there is a reason for it, and the reason for it is that a lot of Savage World was influenced by Torg, the original one. The designer for Savage Worlds, Shane Hensley, his first work was an adventure for Torg, and he introduced some things like using cards for initiative and soaking damage and stuff like that. I mean, obviously there's a lot of differences, but there's definitely a influence there. And then the funny thing, of course, because he's the lead designer of Torg, some of the things from Savage Worlds that Savage Worlds introduced are now getting introduced into Torg.
Oh, that's cool.
And specifically, it's the edges, and we're not doing hindrances, but basically we're doing something called perks. And those are all the cool special abilities that everybody has. And so there is a definite, mixing of DNA in between Savage Worlds and Torg.
Nothing wrong with that.
The core mechanic is you roll a d20. Now, one of the weird things about Torg is that your results aren't based exactly on what that die rolled. What you have to do is you roll the die, and you have to look up a number on a bonus chart. And all of the modifiers modify the number that comes off that chart. And this is one of those things that we kind of looked at getting rid of, but we figured out fairly rapidly if we tried to get rid of that chart, that was the basis of the game. It just did not look like Torg at all.
It became not Torg.
Right, exactly. It was a different game at that point. So we had to keep that there. But the difficulties with that, I think, are mitigated by some of the changes we did make. One of the problems with the original Torg is that it could be slow to resolve a lot of actions. But some of the simplifications we've done, I think, are dealing with that sort of thing. But anyway, so you roll a d20, and the d20 explodes on 10s and 20s.
Right.
And so you can get really high results. And in addition, you can spend possibilities as a player. And each player starts with 3 each in each act. They can get more by playing Cosm cards, and we'll get into that later. But when you spend a possibility, you get to roll and add to your total, but with a minimum of 10. And so you can get some pretty high results by doing that. And there's actually a result called a glory result, which is if you actually roll a natural 60, you get really cool benefits. In addition to needing that to actually take territory back from the High Lords. You need these glory results because if you remove the Stellai from these realities before getting a glory, and what you do is you get this glory, it's an amazing feat, you go tell everybody about this feat, and that storytelling infuses these people with additional possibility energy, because once they get transformed, they don't have any possibility energy left in them. And if they transform again, which is what would happen if you removed the Stellai and that area became core Earth again, they basically fade into what ifs. They basically go poof. And needless to say, this could cause a lot of casualties, and you don't want that to happen.
Right.
So glory results are actually important for the story of the game. And like I said, you get some really cool benefits if you do manage to do it.
That sounds really cool. I like that.
So in addition, then possibilities can be used to soak damage, much like I think in Savage Worlds. I'm not totally familiar with that system, but I think that's one of the things that it does as well. And one of the changes we've made is that in the original system, you actually had to compute the exact result that you get. So if you needed a 10, you would have to, and you rolled a 17, you'd actually have to calculate, okay, I got 7 above, and then look up a table and say, okay, what success was that? Or have to add a bunch of different numbers. And that number would get added to the damage. And it was very clunky. But now we got 3 success levels. Your target number, 5 higher, 10 higher. And other than that, nothing else matters except for that glory result. And so you can very quickly roll the die, figure out your bonus, and figure out very quickly what success level you got.
Oh, cool.
And so, of course, good and outstanding successes give you both better effects if you were casting a spell or in psionics. And if you were attacking with a weapon, you get to roll bonus dice. And this is one of the things we've added to Torg, and there was definitely a little bit of resistance to this. But it worked so well that we kept it. And the reason it worked well is that you roll damage, you roll a d6 effectively, and on a 6, it counts as a 5 and explodes. So now you don't just have exploding d20s, you have exploding d6s.
Right.
And exploding dice is always fun.
Exploding dice is always fun. You want that occasional, like, awesome, like the critical hit from D&D or whatever. You want those moments. And so it sounds like that mechanic gives you that nice moment where you get to stand up. Oh, yeah, we got this dude, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically the core mechanic. Is there's little differences here and there, but that's pretty much the sum of it. And what's nice about this system is that original Torg had a lot of subsystems. So magic was different from invoking miracles, and psionics and pulp powers were different. And so you had all these different systems that came in, the supplements. And it actually got to the point that if you really wanted to play a complete game, you had to have the core rules and 7 supplements for basically the special rules for those settings. But we're not going to have that in Torg Eternity. You're going to be able to play with all of the cosms with a decent amount of crunchy support right from the get-go.
Oh, good.
We'll add lots of cool stuff later on, but we're not going to be changing the rules. Is basically what we're going to do.
So you get more character classes, other maybe things, more monsters to fight or whatever, but the core mechanics are always there, right?
Exactly.
Right. Perfect. Cool.
So what makes Torg unique is the first thing is that it has its own special rules for how reality works.
Right.
And somehow I managed to become the reality guru for the design team, which still is kind of bewildering to me. But anyway, I was sort of pushing in a lot of cases to maintain fidelity with the original Torg rules. Some things we had to change because there were some rules with reality that the original Torg sort of left very vague, and some actually were problematic. And an example is, well, let me back up and go into the basics of what reality is. You have 2 types of people. You have ordinary people who are called Ords, and it's a derogatory term by the High Lords. And they're your ordinary, everyday people.
They're your muggles.
And exactly, yes.
Right.
And so if they were in a reality that is not their own, and they are doing something what is called contradictory. So if you're in a low-tech area and you're firing a gun or using a computer, you're causing a contradiction. Eventually, the universe notices and puts a stop to that. And the way it does that is it disconnects you from your original reality.
Ouch.
Ords,
painful.
Yes. And eventually that can cause the Ord to transform into the current reality, or the reality he's in.
Right.
Now, they can't reconnect to their home reality unless they actually physically go to their home reality. But then you've got special people called Storm Knights, and these are the heroes and villains. Villains are called Stormers. But basically, these Storm Knights are able to go into these other realities. And even if they're causing contradictions and they get disconnected, they can reconnect fairly easily back to their own reality. So you could go into a low-tech area and use your gun, and nobody else is using their guns. And that gives you an advantage when you're staring down at T-Rex. You could be casting spells in a low magic area, but you're able to still do that because you're sort of still connected to your home reality. But eventually what can happen is that there can become a time when you can transform from one reality to another. And this happened actually a fair bit in the original Torg. But one of the changes we made is that the players are really going to have a lot of control about whether or not you transform from Core Earth to the Nile Empire and stuff like that. It's something that doesn't happen very often, and it's pretty easy to mitigate. But the option is there. If you do go, okay, I'm done with being a wizard. I want to be a pulp hero now with the same character. You'd swap out some of your perks and a couple of your skills maybe, and then you go. But you can actually physically transform from a Isle to Nile Empire to Pan Pacifica and stuff like that.
That's cool.
That sounds very cool.
And there's a lot of weird stuff. Like I remember in the early 90s, the first thing I did when I got on the internet was get on the listserv. Oh, I'm really dating myself now. And we discussed like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin in Torg reality.
Right.
And those discussions went for years, and you basically try to figure out what the implications of some of the reality rules were. And of course that showed some of the problems with the reality rules because of course it's made by game designers. It's not made by physicists or something like that.
Right.
So anyways, another unique thing that Torg did and does is it has what are called interaction attacks. So especially then, most role-playing games, it was, okay, I hit him, I shoot him, I throw a fireball at him. And you're always attacking physically. Well, interaction attacks are attacking verbally. So you might taunt the guy or try to intimidate the people or try to trick them by throwing sand in their face or things like this, or trying to maneuver around a big, bulky guy and try to poke him in the back or something like that. And so Torg actually introduced these attacks and gave benefits for succeeding in them. And these interactions actually come into they tie very closely into the deck cards that we'll be getting into. But basically, when you're fighting in Torg, you're not just shooting the people; you're yelling at them, you're trying to taunt them and stuff like that, which adds a lot of role playing to combat. Really,
right? That's cool.
So anyway, the unique thing about Torg was originally called the Drama Deck. And in original Torg, there was just one deck. In Torg Eternity, we have 3, but before anybody freaks out, there's a reason we have 3, and it's not as bad as people think it is.
Well, I want to hear about this, because before you get to why there's 3 versus 1, like, this idea of these decks seems really cool to me. What's the fundamental goal of these decks? Like, what do they bring to the game?
This determines the pace of combat, pretty much.
Okay.
And because you have the players have what are called destiny cards, and each player gets usually 4 in their hand, and they can play. Some of them have modifiers like +3 to strength, stuff that you need strength for, or dexterity or stuff like that. But as long as you're not in combat, you can play cards out of your hand no matter what. But once you get into combat, you have to make what's called a car pool or an action pool. And you can only play cards out of your action pool. You can't play them directly out of your hand. And what this means is that at the beginning of the combat, you hardly have any cards in your pool. Later in your combat, you've got a lot more. But you don't go Nova right at the beginning of the combat. All of your heavy hitting stuff is going to happen later at the climactic part of the combat as opposed to the beginning, and then you just sort of mop everybody up over the next 2 or 3 rounds. And what this means is that players can trade cards, and what you end up getting is you have players trying to set up big, huge attacks to finish off the bad guy in one big blow.
That's awesome.
And yeah, the players I found just love that sort of thing.
Now, does it take actions to trade cards, or the players basically kind of pause for a moment and start figuring out what they can do?
Basically, there's no cost to trade cards. You can only trade 1 for 1 and only from your pools.
Okay.
But other than that, there's no restrictions on when you can.
That's really cool. Cards. I like the mechanic a lot. That's neat.
Additionally, there are some cards called subplot cards. And the player can play these because he wants to take a little bit of narrative control of the game.
Oh, okay.
So, like, you have Nemesis or Romance cards where you go, okay, I'll play a Romance card, and then all of a sudden you find out that you're going this femme fatale in Cairo takes a liking to your character. And there's 2 Romance cards. So, theoretically, you could have 2 players in a love triangle with that one character, or complications like that. You can play a Nemesis card, which makes all of a sudden a certain character and the GM and the player sort of negotiate. That's your Nemesis. Like, you have actually met this person at some point before, and you come up with a back history, and now this guy really doesn't like you. And for all this, you get extra possibilities. But it basically allows the player to go, I want a little bit of extra spotlight in the game for me. Cool. And there's one card I like called Monologue, which basically allows you to stop combat and go, I am going to make a speech, and everybody is going to listen to me.
That's awesome. I think you should call the romance card the ship card, just so it appeals to the young folks nowadays. That's awesome. So that's great, because there's been RPGs that have the sort of mechanics where players can put plot twists or do things, but I love the idea that it's all card driven and you try to collect these moments and save them for the right time. It's just really, really clever. Now, do these decks change depending on what world you're in, or are they pretty much constant no matter where you are?
The Destiny and the Drama decks don't. The Cosm decks do.
Okay, cool.
And I'll get to the Cosm decks in a bit. But one of the things you ask is, how do I get more cards as a player? You get those cards by doing what's called an approved action. And approved actions I'll get into with the Drama deck. So these are the GM's cards. And one of the neat things about the cards for Torg Eternity, I should mention, is that they all have full color art on them. And
nice.
The art is amazing. I mean, I keep gushing about it, but I love the art in this game. And it was a shame for people not to see the art, because otherwise it'd just be in your rule book. So that's kind of part of the reason why we split the Drama deck and the Destiny deck into two, is so you can have a little bit more space and also show cool art.
Oh, cool.
So anyways, the Drama deck, every round in the combat, the GM flips over the Drama deck card, and each of these cards has a line that is a standard and dramatic. And the different scenes in the adventure are standard or dramatic scenes. And usually the dramatic scene is the last one. That's when you're fighting against the big boss guy. Mm-hmm. But the standard ones are the standard ones. But the difference is that along with those two types of scenes, you have who gets initiative, so who goes first each round, if anybody has an advantage or anybody has a disadvantage. And in a standard scene, the players have the advantages. 2/3 of the time, they'll probably go first. They'll get the advantages more often than the bad guys. They'll get disadvantages a lot less than the bad guys. But in dramatic scenes, that completely turns around. Usually the bad guys are going first. Right. They get the advantages, and you players get the disadvantages.
I like it.
So that makes those dramatic scenes a lot more nasty, because you've got to really start compiling these cards to overcome those issues. And some of these advantages can be pretty brutal. It can give you like free rerolls, or your side gets tired, and so you take what's called shock. And if you take your toughness worth of shock, you fall unconscious. So that's where all those disadvantages come from. And in addition, they have what's an approved action. And these approved actions are things like intimidation, trick, taunt, maneuver. There's a couple other weird ones like multi-actions. Sometimes you can do more than one action in a round. So if you try one of those and you succeed, you get to draw a card. And so there's an actual incentive to do those interaction attacks, because not only do you get benefits by making your opponent vulnerable or stymied, which gives them penalties to either hitting them or their penalties to attack you. But then you get more cards to build up your card pool and eventually defeat everybody. So that's where the card play comes in, with the approved actions. And I think that's one of the best things about Torg combats is how that incentive works.
That sounds really cool. I'm liking everything I'm hearing. This is great. No wonder the Kickstarter's doing so well. This is awesome.
But wait, that's not all.
But wait, there's more.
The Drama deck cards also have what's called, you can use them for dramatic skill resolution. Yeah. So these are tasks that you have a limited amount of time, either because you've got a bomb that is counting down to 0 and you need to defuse it, or you're trying to rip up one of these stellae and the High Lord is sending waves and waves of minions after you, and if you don't do it in time, they'll basically beat you down. But it can also be used for non-combat things, like getting information from different people at a party. One thing that we've done differently is we've actually made chases use this mechanism as well. Chases in the original Torg weren't done very well, but they work really well with this mechanic. And I won't get into too much detail with that because it gets really kind of wonky. But basically, it's if you want to defuse a bomb, this is the mechanic that you use.
Very cool.
All right, cards that do more than one thing.
Now, Dean, how do you combat the notion, or is there a notion, that all these cards seem to offer some really cool possibilities and get creative juices flowing. But at the same time, do they ever feel like they limit what you can do? Like, I remember it was strong feelings in 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons that because all these powers were spelled out on these cards, that players felt like that was all you could ever do. Is that issue ever happen, or do you feel like it just really gets people thinking about creative things?
No, they're pretty generic. Like, there's no like magic spells are not used. Like, there's no magic spells in these decks or things like that. So you might look at your card pool and say, okay, I've got a thing that can give me a bonus to charisma skills, so maybe I'll do a taunt instead, and that might give you an idea of which way you want to go. But no, I don't think that I've ever heard of anybody being restricted that way. Usually what ends up happening if something's taking a long time, it's because the players are planning their one big attack and trying to figure out the best way to trade all the cards, which to me is not a bad thing.
Very cool. So do you think what brings, before we get to the Kickstarter, I would like to understand, like, is it all those very cool mechanics in the different worlds that brings the nostalgia? It sounds like it's a hyper unique setting. I mean, I can't imagine, because Rifts, I don't know, it feels different. I like Rifts and I played Rifts, so I really enjoy it, but it doesn't feel like the same sort of shtick as Rifts to me.
No.
But you got all these really cool mechanics as well. So do you think that all comes together and, like, man, Torg was just a unique RPG experience and I want it back? Is that really where you think the nostalgia comes from?
I think there is, although I liked some of the rules that it had, but especially the last 10 years or so, I've gotten very used to having very smoothly running RPGs with rules that aren't fiddly and stuff like that. And I actually got known on Twitter for being the person who hacks Torg by taking just about any RPG system and trying to apply the Torg setting onto those rules. I never really found one, and I actually came to the conclusion that the only one that I could do it with would be a new version of Torg.
Very cool.
But I'm really happy with what we've ended up getting. And but as far as the nostalgia for me, I'm the type of person who cannot pay attention to one campaign for very long. Like, I've probably got 6 to 9 months at most. And so when I was in college, I would go from Dark Sun to Planescape to, Forgotten Realms, and I flip. Well, with Torg, you do that, and it's part of the game.
Right.
And so, my thing with, like, you see the cool new shiny thing, you go, squirrel! And you want to go do that. Well, you can go do that, and then you can mix other stuff in it. But the big difference with
characters,
right? That's what the cool part is, right?
Yeah,
that's super
and
cool.
I think that the difference with Rifts is that, now, admittedly, I'm not too familiar with Rifts, but my impression is that it takes all these different genres and mashes them all together all at once. Only like it's one big jumbled soup and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's no concept. There's no concept of, like, boundaries where reality shifts. Like, I think that's really what makes Torg to me seem super unique, where you can create any kind of world in Rifts. It's almost like, RPG system, whatever, and you can staple them all together in cool ways. But this is like, I just like the world and the setting and these ideas of how reality binds you seems really cool. And then you couple that with some really interesting mechanics, and I think you got a very unique RPG experience in a world now in 2017 where there's lots of RPG choices, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I just want to go into what the Cosm decks are.
Yeah, sure.
And this is new stuff. And like I said, this is probably my favorite new mechanic in the game. And these are cards that allow the players to gain possibilities, but at a cost. And each player gets one card each act, and once they play that card, that's it. And this is why having this third deck is not a big deal, because you don't keep going into that deck over and over again, like you do for the other two cards. You give out these cards and you can put the deck away. And these cards really reinforce the genre of each reality.
That's awesome.
And I'll just give you a couple of samples. Let's see here. The Nile Empire has an inevitable return card You play to bring any deceased character immediately back to life. Where or how she reappears is up to the GM, and all Storm Knights gain 2 possibilities if this card is used to restore a villain.
Oh, wow, that's cool. I like that already. That's awesome.
Another one for the Living Land is Primal Instincts. The Storm Knights embrace the primal allure of the Living Land. Clothing rips in the most flattering way, and passions are greatly amplified during the next lull in the action. Storm Knights who have an amorous encounter gain 2 possibilities.
That's awesome. I love things like that. It just gives really cool ideas to the players and the GM to go
like
really cool places.
Adventure hooks built into the adventure hooks.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's really good.
And just give you one more, because I love this one. It's Trap from Isle. And it's a deadly trap or hazard appears somewhere in this act. It affects one of the party randomly and deals 1 bonus die of wounds, which is kind of nasty. These wounds can be soaked normally, and this is the funny part. Gain 3 possibilities after the trap is resolved. That means when you play the trap card, you get 3 possibilities. The poor sap who gets nailed by the trap doesn't.
That's awesome. Well, I love
but boy, if you are short of possibilities,
right?
Boy, you have an incentive to play that card.
That is awesome.
And we just so happen to have sort of done the economy, so you really kind of want to play these cards fairly frequently.
That's great. Well, so Dean, you've done a great job of giving us a great overview of what Torg is, and you've weaved in a lot of the cool sort of enhancements and changes that are coming with the new version that's being kickstarted. I just want a quick, I know we're running a little long here, but really kind of quick get your feelings on what's been your reaction. I mean, you guys launched this Kickstarter, like less than a week ago?
Yesterday, actually.
Oh, there you go, yesterday. And
at the time of this recording, it was yesterday.
Yeah, and you're killing it. I mean, your numbers right now, I mean, what was your feeling going launching this thing? Were you confident it was going to do well? I mean, your goal was 8,000, and you're already, way beyond that in one day.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing about that.
Right.
Ulysses Spiel does Kickstarters a little bit different. Basically, the way they've termed it is it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
So the supplements are not part of this Kickstarter. This Kickstarter is just the core book and some of the cool things you can put into the core book. And the reason we do that is because all the stuff is pretty much ready to go now.
Right.
And so once the Kickstarter is done, we do a couple,
you're basically
proofreading passes, and boom, it goes to the printer.
Right.
And so it's quick. We'll do more Kickstarters in the future to do that sort of thing, but we're not like, say, 7th Sea, which had a whole ton of supplements in addition to the main core book that really spiked the amounts. And I mean, we were pretty confident we were going to do pretty well. We were a little shocked at how well we did on the first day.
Right.
Now, funding in 3 minutes, like we laugh, but really we're going to be producing this regardless of what happened to the Kickstarter.
Right.
So the funding level wasn't a big deal. It's what cool stuff do we get to add in to the Kickstarter. And we do have one pledge level. It's called the Delphi Council Cargo Box. And one little thing for old Torg people, the Delphi Council in Torg Eternity, they're the good guys this time. In the original Torg, they were the secretive, backstabbing, covert part of the U.S. government, like X-Files sort of thing. But now they're the ones who are sending Storm Knights out to do all these missions, and they're providing equipment and support and stuff like that. So anyways, so the cargo box, it's $200, but every print product, except for miniatures, you're going to have High Lord miniatures that they've already unlocked.
I saw that. Yeah, that's awesome.
And they look amazing. But every print product goes into the box. And awesome. The shipping won't change and the price won't change. So as far as we get into this Kickstarter, if you buy the cargo box, you get all the stuff that we make physically for that. Except
that's awesome. And we should say too, Dean, this is really cool because you're not back in a Kickstarter that you might get something from people in 2 years. I mean, as you mentioned, the stuff's all written. You're in final stages. The delivery dates here, if you back at the digital level, you get this stuff next month. I mean, or I should say this month. And then then you're talking about the book shipping in October of this year. So this is like almost like a pre-order. Like you're getting this thing within weeks and months of the actual Kickstarter being done, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Right.
The PDF will be available really quickly after the after the Kickstarter's over, and I can't wait for people to finally look at it because we've been working on it for about 2.5 years.
Oh, it's awesome
since we started on it, and it's been a challenge. I mean, I have a complete new appreciation for any person who has to update a role-playing game that people loved.
Oh, right. Because think of the pressure, right? You don't want to screw this up, and you love it too. So it's hard for you because you're like every time you change something, I'm sure you're thinking to yourself, "Am I making this worse? Is this really going to be as good as I think it is?" Right?
Exactly, and you have to bring in new players too. Right. You can't just cater to the old players. So you have different, all these things you have to balance. And I think that we did pretty good. And I have to say, it all goes to Marcus Plotz, who's the owner of Ulysses Spiel. Mm-hmm. He's played Torg since the beginning. He's still playing it for 27 years. And awesome. He liked Torg so much, he bought the game.
That's amazing.
And like I said, Shane Hensley was the lead designer. Mm-hmm. People have always said, well, if you do Torg, are you going to do Savage Worlds? And he's like, no, Torg is Torg. And, and that's one of the things we need to emphasize is that this is not Savage Worlds, even though Shane Hensley's the lead designer.
That's awesome.
There was a lot of...
These models look awesome.
The models are awesome, and the art. I mean, people should look at the Kickstarter. The art is fantastic. I love the art style. It's so evocative, each world. I mean, you described it beautifully, Dean, and it got all these visuals in my head, but then these art bits here for each of the areas and the different realities is like, wow, it just really pops. And get you thinking and get the creative juices flowing. Dean, thank you so much for sharing all this information about Torg. Now, if people want to get in on this action, I mean, obviously they can go right to Kickstarter. They can search for Torg, T-O-R-G, and boom, there it is. Is there anywhere else they can go on the internet to get up-to-date information or any other information?
Well, there's that's probably the best one. We do have a website with all the previews that we did going up into the launch of the Kickstarter as well. But usually searching for Torg Eternity will bring that up on Google pretty fast because Ulysses Spiel has an unfamiliar spelling because it's German.
Oh, right.
So Google Torg Eternity and you'll find us.
Great. Well, thank you again, Dean. This has been awesome. And so again, if you're a role player, or even if you've thought about trying role-playing games out and you can never pick a genre, now you don't have to. So head out, check Torg out on Kickstarter now, and we'll be right back. Take a quick break. We'll hear from Total Fangirl. We'll be back with Dean and more in a little bit.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, Total Fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy, and Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. This week's shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. So it is a lovely Sunday afternoon here in New Hampshire and we just got back from a family movie. We went to see Wonder Woman, which I was really excited to see, but a little nervous at the same time because I feel like the last couple times I've gone to see a movie where everybody just raves about it, I came back from it and I'm kind of like, okay. Like I was out with Logan. Logan was not as exciting for me as I hoped it would be. So when everyone has been raving about Wonder Woman as though it was the greatest thing to ever happened to the DC Universe in the history of the DC Universe, I was a little bit nervous. So we went in with actually not very high expectations because you're trying not to be disappointed. Well, it turns out all of us liked it, and Russ and I liked it. The girls liked it, but we didn't love it. So I guess we're an outlier in that regard. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. So I'll give you a second to like fast forward or pause or something so you don't get spoiled. Okay, that's enough time for you to figure out what's going on. So we loved the beginning of the movie where she's on the island and you see the warriors fighting, which is just amazing. Although my daughter was not real keen on the way the horsemanship was done because she's a rider and she's like, no. So she took some issues there. But I said, Rose, as no kid, it's kind of imagination. It's not real. So, give them a little slack. But we loved that. I loved how it all started when they first arrived in London. I thought some of the scenes there and the battle scenes where the warriors are fighting, and when she's fighting alongside of Steve Trevor and his little crew there when they're out there on the field and on the front in the battle, those were amazing. Those were really, really good. But I kind of felt like it sort of took like a weird turn after the big scene where there was that gala, the ball, whatever they called it. I feel like it was kind of like, well, now what do we do with it? How do we resolve this? It was supposed to be this big moment, and nothing happens at the gala. She just kind of stands there in her blue dress and almost does stuff, but doesn't. And Steve Trevor almost does stuff, but doesn't. So I was a little disappointed. And I thought the final battle was really great between her and Ares. I thought that was incredible. And I thought, how Steve took the poisonous gas up into the sky and sacrificed himself for the greater good was really cool and was a fit in with the theme of the movie. But I just didn't feel like that it sort of just kind of resolved itself. I felt the whole like level conquer all thing was just a little bit hokey. I know you're all going to hate me because I think everybody loves this movie. I think I'm the only person that didn't think it was just amazing. As DC movies go, it was pretty darn fine. But I like the first 3/4, 2/3 maybe, that I thought were just amazing. But then the very end, I was like, oh, this didn't hook me right to the end as much as I hoped. Still, really loved it. Thought it was good. Was not disappointed because I had warned myself and braced myself with low expectations. And I did think that the character of Wonder Woman was fantastic. And I thought the costuming was great. And the sort of feel of the movie was really great. And that music just is killer. And there was also a preview in the front of it for Justice League. And I have not seen anything about this, and dang, when did Aquaman become like such a badass? I'm kind of excited to see this, but also nervous. It's got a ways. I can't even remember where it comes out. I think we got a ways to go for that one. So we saw Wonder Woman. It was not the best superhero movie I've ever seen in my entire life, but I really liked it. And if you haven't gone to see it and you're a Wonder Woman fan, you will go and you will enjoy it, and just hang on for the ride.
You're listening to the Dice Tower Network at Dicetowernetwork.com. More fun than Merchant of Venus. Wait, what?
Who writes these?
Hey, welcome back. And I am very excited to talk about this topic because we haven't talked about it in a very long time, Russ.
No, we haven't. It's been a while.
No. Warhammer 40,000. Is it in the ascendancy? Is it coming back? We haven't played it in a long time.
Nope.
And haven't been active since 5th edition.
Yes.
And even that tapered off. We tapered off in 5th edition. Then 6th and 7th edition came and went. And Russ, despite hating the company, still can't stop himself from buying very expensive rule books.
I do. I collect them all. It's like Pokemon.
But didn't really play any game. I played a few games in 6th and maybe 2 in 7th. And from afar, I would notice occasionally that 7th edition changed so much and had so much stuff added to it, I didn't even recognize it. And I would be able to tell you, I think, with full honesty, that I would not have been able to just pick up a game of 7th edition and been able to play it, because I wouldn't even know how to build an army. That's how much things had changed. Mm-hmm. So in the last year and a half, Games Workshop has done a lot of things right. They've been coming out with new armies that people have been asking for years. 2 examples of that would be entire Harlequin armies and Genestealer cult armies. Mm-hmm. Adeptus Mechanicus has its own army. I mean, a lot of armies that, back in our heyday, Russ, you would have I scratch build, other people scratch, people would scratch build them and use, use as rules.
Right.
Now those armies, the beautiful GW models, they've always done the best plastic models ever, and so now they've started the reach out, the outreach. They're listening to their player base. They really seem to be trying to turn everything around. So it's a very intriguing time to be paying attention once again to Games Workshop, and so on this. And of course, that came right after Age of Sigmar, where they completely destroyed the old world. So there was a lot of goodwill to be won back. And I think, especially judging by people like Owen and things like that, that they have slowly won back those Age of Sigmar people, and Age of Sigmar seems to be going quite strong. And so now it is the time for 40K 8th edition, and of course they sent us that box, the Dark Mechanicus box. I mean the Dark Imperium box, and here we go. Let's delve into this box, Russ.
Well, before we get too far into the box, though, Craig,
okay, Russ. Before we get too far.
Well, no, you did a good job of setting up your and my relationship with Warhammer 40,000. But we do have a lovely guest here in the third chair.
Well, I was about to toss it to Dean.
So, Dean, what's your relationship with Warhammer 40? I mean, longtime listeners know Craig and I have been talking about 40K since episode 1, so they know our whole history there. But Dean, what's your relationship with Warhammer 40,000? Were you ever a player? Were you ever passionate about it like we were?
It's funny. I think I might parallel your rise and fall, so to speak, with your relationship with 40K. I started right at the end of 2nd edition. I think I played 2 games of that, but I basically cut my teeth on 3rd and 4th. I would say 4th is my favorite. Played a fair bit of 5th, but I did not play any 6th or 7th edition stuff, and really haven't had a lot to do with Games Workshop in the last 8 years or so, I guess.
Now, did something like this, did you stop because other games distracted you? Did you stop because you got disenchanted? Did you get burnt out? Or is something like this something that's interesting to you?
I think Games Workshop made some decisions that I did not care for. And I mean, there's definitely a little bit of other games were there, but I think that it was a good example of a company, I think, maybe taking its fan base for granted a little bit. I know we don't want any hate, but they seem to be turning around. So I am very intrigued to see what this is like, because like Craig, I have no idea what 7th edition was like.
Right. So we then are potentially the target market for 40K 8th edition, right? Because it's the tagline, if you go to the Games Workshop website right now, it's something like the Warhammer 40,000 you've asked for, something like that, right? So clearly their message is, hey, we're listening, to Craig's point earlier, we're listening, we made the game you've wanted. So to me that implies that they're trying to win us back, in addition to appeal to the folks that have never left them, plus, any obviously new folks as well, right? Does that seem right? It feels like where they're heading or trying to go.
Yes. Yep.
So Craig's got the juicy box in his hands. Craig, let's talk about it and see if it's appealing to Dean and myself and you as we dive into this thing.
Okay.
So how do you get into...
Wait,
sure,
Russ.
Sure.
What does it sound like when you open the Dark Imperium box?
Well, sure. So you pop the box open.
Yeah.
And first of all, what ends up happening is you can't really hear the dark mood music of the Grimdark coming out because you're shocked by all the skulls just scatter across the...
That's true.
500 to 1,000 skulls just fall out of the box right when you open it.
Yeah.
Because there
are a lot of skulls.
The essence of Warhammer 40,000 is still very much present in this box, which is fantastic. Yeah. So you definitely get that feeling of skulls.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll let you off with that one. I'll let you off with a warning. But okay, so this box is gonna set you back $160. Mm-hmm. But it's loaded with stuff. So first, it's awesome. It's the box comes. It's a sleeve with beautiful artwork in that, so that you draw that off. And then there's another box inside that box, which is the miniatures. That's sort of a thin box with just all the sprues, and there are a ton of miniatures in this box. There's 55.
It's a lot of dudes.
I think.
Yeah, something like that.
55 models.
And each side's got like a bigger model too, right? Doesn't both sides have like some kind of little vehicle situation?
No. What you get is 22. What we're calling now the what are they called? The Primaris Marines.
All right.
Now Primaris Marines. We won't go too deeply into how much the fluff is changing because the fluff is changing minute by minute. But the Primaris Marines are basically. Rub out, girly man. I have never been able to pronounce his name, and I'm not even going to try.
Rub out, girly man.
I'm pretty sure it's not rub out, girly man, but that's the closest.
No, but it should be.
Yeah. And so he is the Primarch of the Ultramarines. He's the guy who actually came up with the whole concept of Space Marine chapters and all the rules that hem in the Space Marines after the Horus Heresy 10,000 years ago. And then he was wounded and he was put in stasis and everybody thought he was dead. By now, all of the Primarchs, all 20 of them, that were originally created by the Emperor and that are the genetic basis for all the Space Marines everywhere, they were all either dead or disappeared. And so they were like a thing of the past. And GW actually said, we are never making Primarchs, so don't even ask. Because they're never coming back. And then over the last few years, of course, they started to bring back this thing they called Warhammer 30,000, which was basically playing the same game, but playing it during the Horus Heresy, which was really cool. And it started out as Forge World, their resin branch, making all these cool old-fashioned models, And then GW got in on the act, and so they were making cool plastic models, so you could do a plastic Horus Heresy army. And of course, those games took place when the Primarchs still strode the stars, and so they started making Primarchs for that. And GW was like, whoa, that's not really Warhammer 40,000 though. That's Warhammer 30,000. We said we weren't going to make Primarchs for 40,000. We're not. And then, boom! First out comes Magnus. And Magnus is the Primarch of the Thousand Sons. They're a traitor legion who focus on sorcery, and their whole planet got sucked into the warp during the Horus Heresy, so it basically got sucked into hell. And their Primarch was no longer human. He was actually turned into a giant demon prince. So, yeah, okay, a giant demon prince survived 10,000 years. So you were like, okay, that could have happened. Beautiful, amazing model. Huge, giant, enormous model. Then all of a sudden, about 3 months ago, boom, Rub Out Girly Man comes back. And he's an enormous model, too, because the Primarchs were huge, larger-than-life giants, basically. And so now you actually have this guy back, and lo and behold, he's horrified by what the Imperium has become in 10,000 years, horrified to find out what happened to his father, horrified to find out what happened to the chapters and that everything's all religious now when it was a secular Imperium that he helped to create. And 10,000 years ago, before he was wounded, he had started this top secret project, realizing that they were going to need a super weapon. So he created this with the help of an Adeptus Mechanicus lord. He created this whole new template for creating better, bigger, faster, stronger Space Marines, and that's what the Primaris Space Marines are. So when you open this box, you got 22 Primaris Space Marines. That's a whole army because every one of these guys has 2 wounds. Their guns are better. They're just amazing. They're awesome looking, and they're true scale. So they look like they're 7 or 8 feet tall when you put them next to an Imperial Guardsman.
So I'm a little confused though. So are the Primarchs alive now, or are they alive in 30K?
No. There are 2 of them alive now.
Okay.
Magnus is alive with the assumption that the other traitor Primarchs that weren't killed during the Horus Heresy could very well come back, including Mortarion, the Death Guard Primarch who lives somewhere in the warp.
Are they playable models that are in the box?
They are playable models.
And they're in the box?
They are not in the box.
Oh, okay.
They are in the game. In the box, you get 22 of these new generation Marines.
Okay.
You get a company commander in special cool new armor. They've all got special cool new armor, special cool new weapons. You get a commander, you get 2 lieutenants, you get a standard bearer because you can't have a Space Marine army with a big giant standard. Mm-hmm. Then you have 2 5-man squads of guys with bolt rifles, which are better than bolt guns. And you have a 5-man squad of Hellblaster plasma rifles, which are better than regular plasma guns. And then you have these 3 jump troop guys that everybody's getting confused with because jump troops in Space Marine armies have always been assault troops. These guys, each of them carries 2 basically sawed-off heavy bolters. So each of these guys is shooting 6 shots a turn at 18 inches, strength 5, strength 5 AP2, I think. So really powerful anti-infantry guns, and there's 3 of them in this squad. So they're pretty amazing, and their armor is better, their toughness is better. They're really amazing guys. So that's what you get for the Imperium. You get all infantry, including these 3 amazing jump infantry. For the Death Guard, which are the bad guys, you're getting 7 Chaos Space Marines, 7 Death Guard. You're getting 20 Pox Walkers, which are basically plague zombies. You're getting the vehicle, which is the bloated drone, which is like a really amazing looking, cool, gross, disgusting drone. So it's got like 3 propeller blades that hover, that's bloated corpse all over the battlefield. And for your characters, you're getting 1 giant Lord of Contagion, who is an old, 10,000-year-old champion of Nurgle, who is on a big, massive base, and he's in ancient Terminator armor. He's got all kinds of cool abilities. You get a Chaos Sorcerer, so you get some psychic powers in any of these first games, and you get the Chaos version of a Standard Bearer, which is different for every Chaos God. And for the Nurgle, the diseased Chaos God, it's this guy carrying around this giant bell that makes all of the Nurgle guys faster, basically. So you got a bunch of infantry for both sides. They amount to, in the new game, roughly 10,000 points aside. The Space Marines have 934 points, and the Plague guys have 896 points. So you're within about 40 points of an equal match, and within 1,000 points. So a few guys extra here or there, and you would have 1,000-point army.
So 1,000 points aside. You might have said 10,000. So it's 1,000 points per side.
I meant 1,000 points aside. Yeah.
Right. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty amazing stuff right out of the book. Plus a hardcover rule book. So you get the full-fledged rule book, not the old mini rule book you used to get with the starter set. Plus you get some cool dice that are really neat. You get 12 cool there's no icons on them or anything, which is good because GW always screws that up and puts the icon on the 1. But they're really cool translucent red dice that are really neat. And you get a plastic ruler, 12-inch plastic ruler that's got all kinds of cool little icons on it and everything, which is really neat. So right out of the box, you're going to be able to put these guys together relatively quickly, although they're not really snapped together. You're going to have to glue them onto their bases and stuff. So the Christmas morning test is not really passed here. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they're not hard to put together. There's really only one way to put them together for the most part. I was able to use some old Space Wolf bits because every chapter is getting these Primaris Marines, so you can paint them up as any chapter you have. So I did make them Space Wolves, which was relatively easy. The heads are all separate, so you can swap in other heads here or there. So I was able to do that. And it took me probably about 2 days of modeling time, of moderate modeling time, to get these armies all set, ready to go, based and everything. And again, those are all on Twitter if you want to look at them and see how much bigger the Space Marines are from a normal Space Marine now, and how much bigger the Plague Marines are the same scale, so they're all on larger bases than the old Space Marine, the regular Space Marines. So that's pretty amazing. You get all that in the Dark Imperium box for $160.
That's a lot of stuff. Dean, does that sound like a good? What do you think of that value, and what do you think that comes in there? I'm amazed that you're getting the big. I mean, that hardcover book.
With the hardcover rulebook.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Although, of course, they have to add 30% for Canada.
Right. Well, Craig, is the hardcover book? It's big, right? It's like a giant size hardcover.
It is the full size rule book.
How many pages is that bad boy?
It's 280.
And is it full color?
It does have an index.
Yep.
It is full color.
Nice.
It has a great table of contents as well.
Excellent. So what's also interesting about this is, well, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Well, what's also interesting is I was looking at their website, and they have lots of different ways to enter back into or start for the first time Warhammer 40,000. And I thought this was pretty clever. So in addition to so you can buy the starter box, or what I'm calling the starter box, the Dark Imperium set, which as Craig described, gives you 2 factions, what I would say
full armies.
2 full armies.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah, 1,000-point armies of Marines versus Chaos. And you got your hardcover rule book. So it's a great starting point for the passionate guy. $160 is a little over an impulse buy, but it's still a great. But you also have the option to do, they have what they're calling the index collection. So the codexes are now called indexes, right? And they're these collections of rules.
There will be codexes.
Oh, there will. So these are like
the
starter
indexes.
codexes.
If you remember, old timers like us will remember when they went to 3rd edition and all the armies were. It might have been Fantasy that was actually collected in the black and white little pamphlet.
Yeah, they're the black lists, right? I remember that.
Yeah, the black lists. Yeah. This is their version of that.
But these are soft cover.
They're big, soft cover, but they are full color.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. I got a chance at the comic store, and then I looked at Matt's a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They include rules for every model that Games Workshop has available right now. So everything they sell for $40K is available in one of these 5 indexes.
So that's
and
awesome.
then there's going to be codexes that will then kind of pick up where those leave off.
But this is great. So there's these really well thought out, very colorful, full rule indexes for each of the factions. For $120, you get the whole set, or you can buy indexes individually a couple different ways. You can buy the indexes by themselves at $25 each.
Yeah.
Or you can get these starter sets, and there's a separate starter set for each faction, which includes their index and a starter mob of models for $110. And it looks like, as you look through them, they're all roughly a squad of dudes, some sort of leader guy, and some kind of walker vehicle situation. So like the orcs have a mob of guys, a leader, a boss, and then maybe some knobs, and then they got a killer can or something in the background there. So like really good choices if you wanted to jump in and get everything you need to, the index and the models for the Necrons. You could do that. You still need a rule book. The rule book's available by itself for $40 as well. And then there's also for the hardcore 40K passionate player, there's the $420 limited edition, right, Craig?
Which is gorgeous and comes with all kinds of cool stuff, but it's $400.
It's for the hardcore. It's for the hardest of hardcore. Which I'm resisting, but that's
$420.
I can't.
Although it does come with it's like 15 or 20 metal skulls, because why would you not? Which is funny considering what you said about opening the box.
Right.
But if you get the $420 one, you really do just get a bag of skulls.
So Craig, here's the thing. None of us stopped playing Games Workshop games because the miniatures weren't still awesome. Their miniatures are always awesome. So, but are the miniatures still that quality? And let's say the Dark Imperium. I mean, you already described it a little bit.
Well,
are they
something to keep in mind that for 3 editions now, the starter boxes have come not with the standard infantry models, but with sort of snap together monopose models.
Yep.
So they are those, but they have perfected that particular technique to an amazing degree.
Right.
So if you have one squad of these guys in your army, and then the plan is for them to come out with kits that will be more multi-pose models for the other squads. I mean, you can't go wrong. The Plague Marines in particular, each one of them is a grotesque example of its bloated, disgusting, diseased kind. The plague, the pox walkers, you got 20 of them, 2 of each pose. So that's 10 different poses. And again, most of those are only 1 or 2 piece models. And you might not like them because they're all grinning. The shtick behind Nurgle is that he's like a happy-go-lucky chaos god. He just wants everybody to get along. Let it come over here, give Papa Nurgle a hug. So all of his demons are smiling and they're happy and they're like, but they're all these gross, disgusting, bloated, diseased things.
All right.
The Space Marines, slightly more posable, because you can kind of adjust a little bit where the guns are. The way they're holding the guns is going to be the way they're holding the guns, but you can put them up, or maybe they're like at the ready. Although there are a few of these guys where it's quite clear the way the joins go together at the shoulder, that it gives you like 3 or 4 different options for where the arm can go. So there is some posability. And like I said, the heads are all separate. So you can make them all looking in different directions, which just that makes them look different enough that they don't look like they're all the same pose. So I would say Games Workshop is hitting it out of the park still with its plastics, and I cannot wait to see what it does with both the Primaris Marines and the Nurgle. There's a rumor that the next big thing after this release is going to be a huge blast release of a whole bunch of new Nurgle stuff, which is what they did with Tzeentch 6 months or a year ago, where the Lord of Change and Magnus came out, and all their new Marines came out. So the rumor is they're going to get that treatment, and the Primaris Marines will come out roughly the same time. So I can't wait to see how these translate into more posable kits, but the ones in the box are beautiful. I'm getting another whole set just so I can have a whole bunch of models, and I'm just looking forward to having all those different versions. And the characters are crazy. They're huge. They're awesome. I love it. I think the miniature quality is great.
Well, that's a cool thing. Go ahead, Dean. Sorry.
So I'm looking at the webpage right now. Are those bases? Are those what used to be the Terminator size bases?
No, the Terminator's going 40 mil bases. These are a new base size. They're 30 mil bases.
Oh, okay.
So they're 5 centimeters more than millimeters, excuse me, more than the standard, which has been 25 millimeter for a very long time.
Okay,
that's cool. So and the thing is, Craig, what I think is amazing about 40K, and if Games Workshop can pull this reboot off, I think it's going to be impressive. Is that you don't have to wait for any cool models because they already have a massive collection of awesome models for all their factions. So, yeah, it's going to be amazing to watch them take it to the next level, all this new stuff. But right now, there's gobs of great-looking Tau and Necrons and Dark Eldar. And the best part is all the rules are live now, too. So if you can jive right in with your favorite army right now. But the question...
Well, you've got to wait for the indexes. But they're coming out right around the corner.
They come out when
Are they going to be online?
I believe so. I believe their plan is to basically follow the Age of Sigmar release model, which was the rules are only 8 pages. We should say that.
We haven't got there. Yes, we're coming to that.
We haven't gotten there yet. So yeah, those 8 pages I believe are you can find it's 4 pages for Age of Sigmar, and those are everywhere. You can find them everywhere online on the website. Just download. And it's relatively easy to find them. So I believe those are going to be. I don't know. I have been told that all of the rules are going to be available for free online. That they don't want to go with the whole, hoarding those rules and making you spend all that money on those rule books as a model. But the official language that I've seen is vague enough that I'm not convinced that that's the way it's going, that it might be these 8 pages that are free and you need to get the rule book for the expanded rules on terrain. Like terrain in this 8-page thing is very, very simple, and it's very harsh for infantry. That's almost impossible to get a cover save. In the basic 8-page rules. But then if you've got the rule book, it's got a slightly more expanded, I think it's 3 pages of terrain, but that's a lot more daunting sounding than it really is, because each section is a big picture of an example of the terrain, and then a brief paragraph of what that terrain looks like in the 40th millennium, and then a very short rules section. And when you add that in, then you're getting your cover saves that you would expect from a regular miniature game and things like that. Right out of the 8-page, going by the 8 pages, for instance, shooting over a giant pipe at one of my guy gets no cover. But as soon as you add in those little 3-page clarifications, he's getting cover. Okay. So, yeah.
So that rule book for $40, is that the same hardcover rule book that's in Dark Imperium?
It absolutely is. And
that's not bad of a price.
Then. No. And it's using, if you kind of ignore the writing on it and just look at the artwork for the quality of it, it is, it's a Dungeons and Dragons book, Russ.
Yeah. Right.
In that it's got different finishes on the cover. So cool. There's shiny bits and dull bits.
Oh, that's cool.
So the artwork, there's a double-headed eagle and a serpent wrapped around a Warhammer, and that's all shiny. And then in the background is another double-headed eagle that's muted, and then the Warhammer 40,000 logo is shiny. So it looks very much like it was designed after those really fancy new 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons books.
Oh, very cool. So that's awesome. So we know. So let's get into the rules, right? So Craig mentioned there's 8 pages of actual rules, but there's other pages in the book, as we learned in Rapid Fire, that add layers of depth to the game, right?
Yeah, and missions.
And everything else. So
crazy number of missions in this book.
But let's go through the basic rules, and I'm really curious, Dean, because I know you and I got out of the game. Well, I certainly did, primarily around rules issues. So I'm really curious to see these, and I've read through the rules. I haven't played the game yet. Craig's played at least one game. I'm going to play a lot more. So we're not going to review the game today. We're just talking about first impressions and what's making us excited about it right now. So there are 8 pages, Craig. I'll run through the rules. They're really pretty simple.
Yep.
I think they've taken a page. Well, they're emulating what they did with Age of Sigmar, which I would argue they borrowed some ideas from Mantic. Which Mantic was the first game company I can think of that really said, you know what we need to do is make our rules like dirt simple, like 4 pages. And we had Alessio on the show a long time ago talking about that. And I think Games Workshop's gone that route too, so let's talk about this a little bit. So it's only 8 pages. The primary game, there's not any kind of like going to shock you with how it works, right? So it's still you go, I go. So I'm going to activate all my units, and then Craig's going to activate all his units. And we're going to go through each of these phases. So there's a movement phase, a psychic phase, a shooting phase. Then there's the charge phase, fight phase, and a morale phase, right? So there's these high-level phases you go through. And I figure we just walk through each phase and kind of talk about how they work. The movement phase is already interesting because they've changed the primary rule stats. So in more recent editions of 40K, movement was pretty much the same for every model, right? The same movement
6 inches.
stat.
Everybody moved 6 inches.
Now everybody's got a movement stat, right? So already there's more variety in the game now, right off the bat, because there's a different stat line and movement's different for everyone, right?
Yeah, and the reason for that is now you're getting rid of these models are fast, so they move 6 inches. Plus they have fleet of foot, which is a special rule. These models are slow, so they've got this, but then they've got this special rule. Now everybody's just got their movement stat.
Right. And basically movement's super simple. So you move them the distance, but you have a couple different kinds of movement you can choose. So while you're moving, you can't end within an inch of the enemy. If you are starting within an inch of an enemy, you can fall back, but when you fall back, you must end outside of an inch of the enemy. And if you do choose to fall back, you cannot do what's called an advance, which is basically running, nor can you charge, which is to engage someone else. And if you also fall back, you can't shoot either the turn you fall back unless you have the fly special rule, in which case you can. And the only other really fancy thing in movement there is the option to advance. If you choose to advance, I don't know why they didn't call it run, but they choose it to call it advance.
Yeah, that is a very strange choice, and it's confusing because you will if you're anything like me, you're going to constantly say
most
run.
games call movement advancing, which is kind of weird. But in any case, if you choose to advance, i.e. run, then it tells you specifically you're foregoing the option to shoot or charge, but you get to add D6 to your movement stat, right? So it's like the old fleet of foot rule. You can move your full movement stat and you add D6 to that, and you get a little bonus movement, right? That's essentially movement, right? That's the whole movement section of the book.
That's the whole movement. Yep.
Pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Your models have to stay 2 inches within 2 inches of each other, so that remained the same.
That's still a thing. So already more variety in the game right there, which is pretty exciting. I like the option there, and you still have fleet of foot, which is interesting. And
terrain affecting movement, as far as I can tell, is only affects you when you're advancing, which is kind of like out of bolt action.
Yep.
Where you can still get your normal move when you're moving through terrain. You can't run. These guys, you can do the run or advance a little bit, but you're slower at it.
Right.
I like that.
So that's the movement phase. Then you go on to the psychic phase. So I like the fact that the psychic phase is explicitly called out. It gives you that, when I look at core rules for games like this, I look for like, what is the flavor of the game? Like, what are the core rules saying to me about the flavor of this game? And having a psychic phase just says magic in the future, right? Which I like.
Right.
So this is pretty simple too, Craig. But again, correct me if I'm wrong here. But basically, you're going to choose the psychic power you're going to cast, and right in the core rules, there's the psychic power smite. Every caster has that.
Yep.
Right. So, which is nice to see because it gives you the framework of how powers work. So basically, you're going to roll 2d6, and you're going to compare it to a number next to the power called the warp charge, which is essentially the number, the target number on 2d6 you want to hit, equal to or exceed to cause the power to go off. If you roll snake eyes on your psychic test, basically you take
or boxcars,
right? You take a D3, what they call mortal wounds, which basically means there's no save against them. And what's worse is
there are some ways to avoid it, but it goes right through all armor and invulnerable
saves, right? And if you die from this, you then explode in psychic energy, and so all models within you of 6 inches take D3 mortal wounds as well.
Yeah.
So
could be all units. Yeah,
all units.
Bad.
So that's nasty. So it's definitely got that flavor of heads exploding from old school 40K, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
And we should say also, there's also the resist the witch option. So any psyker your opponent might have can immediately attempt, if they're within 24 inches of the guy casting the spell, can immediately attempt to basically cancel the spell out by also rolling 2d6. And if he or she gets greater than the roll you got, then you are canceled out. Right, Craig?
Yeah.
Did I miss anything there?
Yeah. Nope. It was awesome. And I played Nurgle last night, so I got the chance to use the sorcerer who's coming out of the box. He's the only psyker that you've got. The Marines don't have a librarian yet. And so Smite is awesome, and you got 2 of the 3 psychic powers of Nurgle, and they're random, so that's cool because there's one psychic power that makes it harder for enemies to hit one of your units, and there's one psychic power that makes an enemy unit less accurate in their attacks, and then there's one psychic ability that's kind of weird, random, and it leeches 1 point off one of their stats, and it's all random, and it's kind of like it's a bit of a crapshoot, but. So my guy was like going around. He's smiting is awesome. I believe it's a 5. So on 2d6, you're trying to beat a 5. And if you get 10 or more on 2d6, instead of doing D3 mortal wounds, you're doing D6 mortal wounds.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's so there is always that chance, but it's all very simple. It's very simple. It's your one die roll tells you whether you succeeded, whether you got blown up, or whether you're like super succeeded, and then. The mortal wounds are great because they're just going to cut right through everything, and boom, there you go. So they were like not killing 1 or 2 Marines, because these Marines are super Marines that have 2 wounds each, but they're like slowly pecking away at the Marines. Now we should also say we haven't mentioned there's 3 different modes of play, which is right out of the Age of Sigmar rule system. There's open play, where you can play anything you want and everything's fair game, and 2 models can play side by side, whether or not they would normally be side by side. Then there's matched play, and I always forget the name of the middle version, which is kind of like a fast and loose, fun way, but there's still some structure to it. And in matched play, which is what we would mostly play, Russ, because that's how we what in tournaments and campaigns and stuff, what you would normally play, or narrative play is the middle ground. In matched play, you can only use each psychic power once, so there's your limitation.
Oh, per game? Oh, wow.
In narrative play, each psyker can use each psychic ability once. And the only so in matched play, no matter how many psychers you have, you're only casting the one that can save one of your units once.
So it's like a wizard in D&D. You've memorized it once for the day, kind of thing.
Exactly. Well, no, you can use it once every turn, but only once that turn.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying once.
So there's like a limited amount of magic on the battlefield, kind of.
Got it.
And you can use Smite more than once, but each sorcerer can only use it once.
Got it.
So you could be spamming Smite a little bit, but your more unique powers can only be used once per turn, no matter how many psychers you have. So I loved it. I thought it was great. He actually won me the game last night, so that was fun, just because he happened to be within an inch of the objective, which we'll talk about objectives in a little bit. But it was fast. It was fun. It never became a dominant phase of the game. It wasn't overpowering. It wasn't like, okay, so you go, Dave, you go sit down. I played Dave, the nerd herder Dave. And so it wasn't like, you go sit down for half an hour while I do my psychic phase. It was a very quick, okay, he can do 2 things. Boom, boom. He did those 2 things, or he didn't. He did actually roll boxcars once and almost die. So that was fun, I guess, for Dave. But it was a blast. It was fun, flavorful, and yet still with this theme of quick.
So the psychic phase is really quick, and then we go on to the shooting phase, which in the shooting phase, we should say 2 and 40K right in the very beginning, the first of the 8 pages. You are now, well, I think you've been doing this a couple editions now. You can now pre-measure any time in the game, which is good.
Yes.
Yay.
Also, the game is still true line of sight. So there's no area terrain. I didn't read the advanced terrain rules, but I didn't see. It doesn't appear to be.
There's still not the only insofar as the area of things like forests has to be delineated for whether you're in them or not.
Yeah, but in terms of like, it's still true line of sight for like If most of the models are half obscured physically, then you get terrain bonuses. So
exactly.
So that is what it is. Then you the other rule about shooting is you cannot shoot if an enemy is within an inch of one of your friendly models. So you kind of got the protective bubble of friendly fire when there's enemies near. I think there's some certain weapons that are accepted from that, but in most cases you can't shoot.
Yes, pistols.
Pistols, yep. Well, pistols allow you to shoot if someone's within an inch of you, but you still can't shoot
correct.
You still can't shoot a guy if a bad guy can get near you, he can't be shot. Pretty much.
Yeah.
So you declare your target units. Now, this is the interesting thing. You can split fire however you want, right? So it's model by model, though. Even weapon on the model, right? So if the model's wielding two weapons, he can fire one in one direction and one the other direction, or whatever he wants
absolutely
to do.
Can, yep.
There is no facing in the game, and there is no fields of fire on vehicles. So we should say vehicles follow the exact same rules as infantry models, and so do walkers, unless
monstrous creatures.
Now things have special rules on their cards that might, or the data sheets they call them, that might change this. But in the core rules, you can fire all the weapons in your Lehman Russ in any direction you want. Right? There's no fields of fire, which is a neat abstraction. Keeps it simple.
And that. It bothered me as an abstraction another thing that I would love to say is that another thing that GW is doing that I think is awesome is they have a dedicated Twitch channel now. Mm-hmm. And ever since the pre-orders went up, every day they're doing a live battle report.
Right.
And it happens to be right at the end of the school day, which is awesome because it's right in the middle of my free block. Don't tell any of my bosses that. And so my classroom's empty, and there I am with my computer. So I've been watching these battle reports, and I thought the abstraction of no firing arcs would bother me until I started seeing it in action. And what it actually does in my mind, it actually that abstraction frees up my imagination. So now, instead of the tank grinding around and firing in this, it's more of a dynamic, almost like an anime level where the tank is roaring across the battlefield, and when it was here it shot here, when it was here it shot here, and it's so far in the I've watched not all of any battle, but I've watched bits and pieces of 4 different battles now, and I loved it. I loved it, and I loved it last night the way it worked in the game with the fetid bloat drone flying over the marine line, spinning around and shooting its little flamer plague caster pods into the Marines. It was an awesome visual.
So that's simple, which is great. It's easy.
Yep.
You roll for each shot you're going to get. So some weapons have multiple shots, but also you add all the models up in the unit for their total shots. You roll. There's a ballistic skill stat on a model, and now it's very simple. There's no table. You just look at you roll each die. Every die that's equal to or higher than your ballistic skill is a hit, right?
Yep.
Simple.
Yep.
And then you're going to roll to wound. Old school 40K players will probably remember the table, but essentially
it's changed.
It's a little different. But anyway, there's a table in the book you look at. If the target's toughness is, if the weapon's strength is double the target's toughness, it's super easy to wound, and it goes down from there.
The change is actually huge. But
so what's the change?
Well, if the strength of the weapon is equal to the toughness of the model, you hit a wound on a 4+, which is not a change.
Right.
If your strength is higher than the model but not double, then you're wounding on a 5, which is not a change if it's only 1 better, but a huge change if it's anything more than 1 better.
So you're saying if the strength is higher than the toughness, it's a 5 to wound?
If the strength is a 3 to wound, sorry.
Right, so it's easier to wound.
Normally, if it was 2 or more better, then you would be wounding on a 2+.
Right.
And there's a lot of weapons out there that are on that gray zone, the side zone. Now there's a whole bunch of weapons that would normally be wounding Marines on a 2+ that wound on a 3+.
Right.
And likewise, there's a lot of weapons that would normally have wounded the Plague Marines on a 6 that are wounding it on a 5 now. So it's easier to wound models than it used to be for the most part. And to get to that next level where you either need a 6 or a 2, you have to double or more the model's toughness with the strength of the weapon. So it's a slight change, but it actually has a really powerful effect on the game as far as the survivability of these models goes.
Well, you don't even need to look it up on a table after a while. I mean, it's
learn it quick.
And that's something that I'm really kind of liking about what I'm hearing so far, because I found that, especially in the last 5 years, that a lot of these games that have come out with new editions or similar to D&D and stuff like that, where they've simplified things, and you think, well, that's going to be kind of lame, and it's like, well, no, it's not as accurate, but it's so much faster. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, if it's done well, it can really add to the playability of the game.
There's a balance, and one of the things that's super simple now, and I think it needs to be repeated, is the shooting phase we're describing here is the same regardless of target type. So it doesn't. There's no armor for a vehicle. Nope, vehicles have toughness, just like infantry, just like large creatures. They have toughness and wounds, and this methodology is exactly the same. You're shooting a Leman Russ, it's got a toughness. You roll to hit. Is your ballistic skill beaten? You hit it. Check the toughness of the Leman Russ against the strength of your weapon. The chart just Craig ran off is how likely your chance to wound Leman Russ is. The Leman Russ has an armor save and maybe an invulnerable save, depending on the kind of model it is. Your choice then is, so after I've done my wounds, I now look and see what my options are for my armor saves. I might have a regular armor save, which can be modified because weapons have an AP value, so that modifies that save chance. There also might be cover that gives me bonuses to my... So if I'm in cover or there's some kind of obscuring going on, it could be plus to my armor save. Or I could choose to take my invulnerable save. But the trick here is, which is not modifiable, but the trick here is I can only choose one of my saves, which I think is similar to previous editions. So I got to pick. I don't get to have both saves go off. And that's pretty much the shooting phase. Now, one thing we should add here, because when I first heard this, I was a little nervous about the simplicity against vehicles. But one of the things Craig shared with me was he showed me the data sheet for the bloat drone, which is a vehicle type. And what was interesting about the bloat drone, and I'm curious to see if other vehicles' data sheets have this, is that as its wounds go down, its stats change.
Yes, that's the only concession to vehicles and monstrous creatures.
Right,
is that they have these degradations,
which
as
I think
their
is
wounds
awesome.
go down.
So now his movement stat goes down, maybe the strength of his weapon, maybe his toughness, whatever. They can change it because it's not a core rule. They can change it by model type.
Exactly. So some models become still good at shooting, but not as mobile. Other models might lose shooting. Other models might lose hand to hand. So it's different, but it can be different model by model which stats are affected. So
the thing to remember about 40K is, as we tell you these simple rules, and this is something that took me a minute to kind of get my head around, is that a lot, and this isn't actually just 40K, a lot of other games work this way too, a lot of the magic is in the model-specific rules.
Yes.
So and that's going to be a double-edged sword, because now for me to know my movement on my models, if I have a lot of vehicles in my army, I got to look at my stat card and figure out how many wounds I got left and figure out. But I think that'll happen. I think that'll be pretty quick. And I'm sure there's many ways they can mitigate that with cool reference cards. But basically, there's a lot going on here in these what they call data sheets, and essentially the detailed rules for each model. So just keep that in mind. So if this sounds hyper simple, it's not, because there's complexity added in layers around the models you've chosen in your army, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much shooting. Now, one other thing we should mention is there's these different weapon types in the core rules, and these weapon types, just things like rapid fire, you fire twice. Things like grenades have their own stat line, but only one model in the unit can throw the grenade during an attack phase or shooting phase. As Craig mentioned earlier, pistols allow you to shoot even if you're engaged in hand-to-hand combat. So some nice simple rules in there. I think assault lets you shoot even if you declare a charge, which normally you can't. So all these nice simple rules.
Assault's awesome.
What does it do?
Assault you can shoot even if you advanced, if you ran.
Oh, if you ran, right, that's the one.
Yeah. Heavy, you can shoot heavies on the move now, but it's -1 to hit.
Oh, that's cool. And there's modifiers to hit now, which they took out for a few editions ago.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things
you're -1 with the assault rule, with the assault weapons too.
And the only thing about
rapid fire, you get double the number of shots within half the range of the weapon.
Yeah. Now, a couple of things we should mention is the defender gets to choose who takes wounds. So, and it's very clear in the rules. It doesn't matter if the guy you're killing off can be seen by the current shooter. So if he's in the unit you shot, the defender picks who dies. Also, there's special rules about independent character targeting. I think this is similar to an older edition as well. So if the independent character is near other units, you can't just pick him out. He's got to be the closest.
He has to be the closest model. Yeah,
which is similar to old rules too.
Yeah.
So
as long as he's got less than 10 wounds. If he's got more than 10 wounds, he's too big to hide.
Basically, he's a giant vehicle situation.
Yeah.
So that's shooting. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It will probably, and Craig, you tell me this. To me, it sounds familiar with some nice twists. Does it feel familiar with nice twists?
It feels entirely familiar with some nice twists that are all cinematic. Because now Your heavy weapon is going to fire at a vehicle. Your special weapon is going to fire at the really tough guys. Your little weapons are going to fire at the more weedy infantry. And your squad can actually work the way it seems like it should be in the fluff. You're not. There are no templates. Templates are gone. Every template has been replaced with a variable to hit. Like, for instance, if it was a large blast template, it is now heavy D6. So you're going to get D6 shots instead of placing the template. So there's no more arguing about that. Now, the negative side is that you can't, with a lucky shot, hit more than one unit.
Yeah.
Right.
But with the way that the game is now built, and with the way that the data sheets are now done, you could conceivably have a weapon in the future that can do that easily. Just write it into the data sheet. But right now, your battle cannon is going to be hitting one squad.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complaints about a lot of these things, but to me, most of the complaints are either from people who are just looking to complain or purists who, I've run the numbers and I'm going to get 0.5 less hits and stuff like that. But really? I like it just because it's faster.
I like the simplicity
and there's
and the
no
speed.
argument.
I like the simplicity and the speed a lot. There are two rules that make me a little nervous. This is one of them, but I'll come to that in the end because I think you have to take it holistically. But that said, I am not a proponent of theory hammer, meaning that I think you can't make these kind of decisions or insights until you play the game a few times. So while in my head they seem like problems, I am reserving judgment until I play the game because it may be one of those things where in your head it seems bad. Once you play the game, it never actually happens. Or it's such an edge case, it doesn't really matter. So that's the shooting phase. Now, there's also the charging phase, and Craig hinted at this earlier, which is sort of interesting in Rapid Fire, or Geekly did, which is interesting, which is that if you shoot, you can still charge, right? The only preventing you from charging. So basically the rule in the charge phase is, so now the charge phase is here. It's still my turn, let's say, and Craig's on the receiving end of all my evil. So now I'm going to see if I can charge. The rule on charging is if I'm within 12 inches of the enemy, and remember, I can pre-measure, I can shoot a charge. I can choose the charge as long as I didn't fall back, meaning didn't disengage, or I didn't choose to advance, which I would replace with the word run. So I could have shot. I could have shot. I just couldn't have fallen back or advanced, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So now, and I've already seen the results of the shooting phase. So I've gone up. Let's say there's one unit to my left that I really wanted to shoot or charge. I can't decide, and I'm afraid if I shoot him, I'm not going to be in charge range anymore. No problem. Shoot him anyway, and then charge the other guy. Right? No big deal.
Yep.
Now, interesting things about how shooting the charge phase works. They did go the same route as Age of Sigmar, which is if you're within 12, you declare your charge, and you're going to roll 2d6 to see if you can charge. But before you do that, the opponent gets to do what's called Overwatch Fire, which basically means his unit that you're charging can shoot you first.
If they're not engaged.
Right.
Yeah.
And after he shoots you, then you roll to see if you get your charge off. So the guy gets to shoot you no matter what. And if he's 10 inches away and you only rolled a 6 on your movement, you have a failed charge. You don't get to move at all, and he got free shots on you.
Yeah. Although you only hit on 6s on Overwatch.
Yes, that's true. So it's not as likely. But in a big mob with rapid fire weapons.
Still, imagine 30 orcs, man.
Yeah, right, exactly.
A 6 is still hitting 50% as often as they normally do.
Exactly. And one other neat little rule here is heroic intervention, right, Craig? Which means after. Now, what's interesting about charging is you don't actually fight yet. So the charge phase is just
its own thing.
Declaring charges, resolving Overwatch Fire, rolling 2d6, and moving in where you made your roll, right?
Yep.
But there's also a little phase here called heroic intervention, right, Craig? And which is any heroes that are now within 3 inches of charging that just happened can jump in and join the fray, right?
Correct. Yes.
And that can be happening from either side, right? So it could be my hero within 3 or the charging army's guy within 3, right?
Yep, exactly.
Oh, that's nice.
So the heroes can be standing by, not being shot at because of their hero, not the closest model, but combat ensues and they jump in to save the day or try to save the day. So that's the charge phase. Pretty simple. It's essentially a movement phase where some Overwatch Fire happens, right?
Exactly.
And then there's a fight phase, which is where the hand-to-hand combat gets resolved. And this is interesting because everybody who's basically within an inch of each other starts throwing down, right? Yeah. And so basically the player whose turn it is, he picks. Well, no, I think it's the charging models fight first, right? So
yes,
the charging.
We should say there's no more initiative stat at all.
Initiative's
in the
gone,
game.
right? So it's a charging unit fights first, and if I was the one that charged, I pick which of my charging unit fights first. Then, and we resolve all the attacks, which is basically there's an attack stat on a guy, plus maybe his weapon's got more dice thrown. You roll. The resolving of attacks in hand-to-hand combat is exactly the same as shooting, except you're choosing the weapon skill stat instead of the ballista skill stat, but the strength and the wound thing is exactly the same. Right.
And we should say you're going to be throwing a lot less attacks now for the most part. You don't get bonus attacks for charging. You don't get bonus attacks for having extra weapons. You basically, your attack stat is how many attacks you make, and then you can choose among all of your hand-to-hand weapons that you're carrying which weapons you're making those attacks with. Some weapons, such as the choppa and the chainsword, have a special rule where they add an attack. If this weapon is used to make one or more attacks in the assault phase, or in the fight phase, add another attack. So you do get an extra attack for that. But for the most part, most of your assault guys are going to be rolling less dice.
Right.
So what happens if you, say, only get one guy from your unit that charges in within 1 inch of... Like, do you have to get into base to base, or
nope? It's within an inch, and then you get your pile in, which is another 3 inches of movement.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So when you get to so Craig says, or I say, I'm going to nominate this charging unit's now going to fight. The very first thing I do is pile in, which is a bonus 3 inches of movement for anybody not within an inch, and then Craig so that unit attacks, and then Craig takes one of the units that are involved in that combat. He goes, I'm going to activate this. I'm going to fight with this unit now, and they get a pile in also. Right, so it goes back and forth. So there's lots of piling in happening. Dice are flying everywhere. We're doing the attacks. We're resolving the attacks. People are dying. But that's it. There's no There's no fleeing away from combat or anything like that. You just basically you roll attacks for each unit. You resolve the deaths, and that's it. Right. Yep. There's no follow up or anything like that.
Correct. And the thing that kept messing with my head is you're not resolving one combat at a time.
Right.
So Russ is going to do all of his chargers. Then he's going to choose one of his units that was already engaged, if there are any. And then I'm going to go back and then we alternate until only I have guys left. And I don't know. So it's not like he does his guys in this unit, then I do my guys in this unit.
Right.
He does all his chargers. Then he does one of his units that was already locked in. Then I do one of mine that was locked in. And it's not simultaneous.
Nope.
So if you take injuries before you activate your unit, those guys aren't attacking.
Oh, so you could be picking from one side of the table and then...
Right.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Yep. And it's extremely important to pick the right fights.
This is one of the spots where I think they added strategy. So one of my concerns is that about the new edition, and again, this isn't really a fair critique yet because I haven't seen all the model-specific rules, so these concerns may not be real. But one of the concerns I have is some strategic options that I think are core to a war game might not be as prevalent in 40K as they used to. Here's one where they're adding a really interesting one, though, which is the order you choose to fight these battles is really, really important. It's at the level of like bolt action where you choose which unit you're going to activate when that die comes out of the bag, right? Like really important strategic decision happens right here, which is neat, which I think is really powerful. And it's nice to see it in the combat phase because historically, once units get engaged in 40K, it's on autopilot almost. And here now it's not. There's some strategic decisions to make. And if you remember earlier, we said a movement option is to fall back. So after all these combats are over and the turn ends and next turn starts, remember, engaged units aren't stuck. They can choose to essentially flee from combat. They forego the ability to shoot or charge that turn unless they have flight, but they can at least get out of combat and open themselves up to let other guys shoot into that mess. So I thought that was really interesting idea, and I really can't wait to play a little bit and see how much thinking. Craig, I know you guys aren't playing with lots and lots of units yet because it's just a starter box, but did it feel like it was some really important decisions? How much combat did you have going on at once in one?
There was a lot. We wanted to see the combat, so Dave was not playing his Marines quite as standoff. Well, also the objective was requiring us to charge at each other. But there was a lot. There was at one point I had every one of his heroes and almost every one of his squads in assault. With my Lord was in there, my Bell Ringer was in there, my zombies were in there, my Bloat Drone was in there, and my Plague Marines were involved also. So we were bouncing back and forth across the table, and right now in this learning curve phase of the game's history, you're gonna make some mistakes at one point. So it was Dave's turn. He did his chargers, then he moved on to a unit that was already locked, which is not the unit he should have done. He wanted to do the Lord of Contagion is a monster in combat, and he was already locked with a bunch of Marines. He could have activated them to attack me, But instead, he was on a roll, so he kept going on this other unit over here. And then I went, oh, now it's my turn. And he was like, oh, no, I get to do all my stuff. I'm like, no, now we alternate. And so my lord went and cut a whole squad down. So I agree with you, Russ, that's where a lot of your strategic thinking is going to be in the fight phase, is who you're going to activate and when. And now is as good a time as any to talk about command points, which are these cool little things they've added to kind of make you make a fluffy list. And by following the force organization charts, of which I believe there's 6 different types you can get, the different ones you choose, the more fluffy they are, basically, the more command points you get. And in matched play, the command points can be used to reroll 1 die in each phase. Once they're spent, they're gone, and you're going to have usually between 3 and 6 of them. So, so if you don't make that charge, you can reroll 1 die, but only 1 die, because it's only 1 die per phase. But you can reroll a die in the charge phase and then another die in the fight phase if you want. Mm-hmm. Another thing you can do with a command point, you can spend 2 command points to actually, once the person with initiative uses a charger, activates a charger, you can spend 2 command points to activate any of your units that's in hand-to-hand to go next.
Oh, nice.
So you can kind of like, it costs you these very precious points that you've got only a few of through the whole game, but you can kind of disrupt the flow of the assault if you've got models in the right place at the right time.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that one thing I noticed that was not in the core rules was any luck mitigation. So the fact that command points are out there and bring luck mitigation to the game is a huge addition to the game that I really am excited about. Now, what's your typical number of command points you think you might have in a game?
Between 3 and 6.
That's great. So that gives you essentially 3 to 6 rerolls, if nothing else, which is
exactly
nice.
Yeah, and that's and in these games on the Warhammer Community Twitch channel, that's generally what they've all been used for.
I like that. That's
you
really
got
cool.
and you can watch the people who are the players, and you can see, like, I'm going to spend mine all up front because I don't want to go home with them any in my pocket, and other guys are like hoarding them for that moment.
Now, is it 1 command point for 1 die, or is it for the pool of dice you just attacked with? Okay.
Nope. It's 1 command point for 1 die, and you can only reroll 1 die per phase.
Okay. Interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's the fight phase. So what I like about this already is, and you think about, Dean, some of the armies, right? Like, it adds a lot of cool tactics to the fighting phase for assault armies, which is neat.
Yeah. The thing that I like about this is that it's not. Yeah, it might be adding some strategy, which might take a little bit more time, but that's okay, because I'd rather take time thinking about how you're going to do it as opposed to spending time resolving it.
Yes, agreed. And they're resolving super fast so far. So the last thing, and there's a couple places. So and I know I'm a little weird here as a miniature gamer. I know most miniature gamers are focused entirely on how cool do the models look, and just give me a framework to put my models on the table. And I'm a guy, I like that, but I also like the mechanics mean a lot to me. And so when I'm looking through rules like this, I'm always looking for rules that make me want to try the game. Like, ooh, I can't wait. An example might be like in Rune Wars and X-Wing, like double blind hidden movement choices before anybody does anything. Ooh, I want to see what happens, Or, the bag in Bolt Action, or, Gates of Antares, the way pinning works. Like, those things are so interesting. So the morale phase in 40K is interesting because in the new version, because in past versions, the morale phase has been, fuzzy.
There hasn't been a morale phase.
Well, it was phased out, quite frankly, because it got so fuzzy. They decided, well, screw it. We're getting rid of it. So it's back now, but it's back in a very simple way that I can't wait to see how this goes. Because part of me is like, that's super awesome. The other part of me is like, well, I can see weirdness, but again, it's Theory Hammer. So here's how it works. So now, after all the fighting's occurred, so shooting has happened, but the interesting part is fighting has happened. And during fighting, both sides takes losses, right? Because we're going back and forth fighting. So after all that's happened now, the players together look at the entire table, and we start taking morale tests against any unit that's lost a model or models this turn, whether it's from shooting or hand-to-hand combat, right?
Yeah.
Or other reasons, like failed psychic tests. So you look at out there, and then you're going to make a morale test. And what you do is you're going to roll a D6 for your units that took losses for each unit, and you're going to add the number of models that were slain this turn. And this is the
in all phases.
But only this turn, which is interesting. And you add that, and if that number is greater than the highest leadership value in the unit, I like that rule because basically it always implies the highest leadership guy's the leader. Every number you beat your leadership by, you take a mortal wound in your unit. So no crazy like trying to figure out which way the guys run, how far they run, do they hit the edge of the table? None of that stuff. It's just more guys essentially die, but the fluff there, of course, is they're running away. But you just roll.
Exactly. They're running away, but you're not tracking them and trying to figure it out. And it's another abstraction.
And the more guys you lost, the higher the probability that you're going to take more casualties due to morale, right?
Yeah.
So super simple, but it brings a thing that I like to see in the big. I like morale rules in my war games, and so I like that this is there and it's a factor, and so I think it's pretty neat. I don't know, Craig. How did the morale phase feel in practice when you guys are fighting?
When you're looking at Marines, it's not really a factor.
And why is that?
Because they're 5-man squads in the starter box. So a 5-man squad of Marines, their toughness 4, that's really high. They've got 2 wounds each. It's really hard to take out a model. If you're lucky, you took out 2 models out of a 5-man squad.
Right.
And then they're rolling 1 die. Their sergeant's leadership is an 8.
Right.
So they have to roll a 6. And even a 6, if you killed 2 guys, is matching that. So you'd have to kill 3 guys for there to even be a danger of them losing anybody.
And here's the thing about it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, so in a 5-man unit, if you killed 3 guys and he gets unlucky on his roll, then he could lose another guy. But with these small units of tough guys, it's hard to make the morale phase work for you.
Well, here's the thing too that I find interesting about their design choice here, and I'm sure there's a really good reason for it. I'm sure they went through a lot of this, but it's not total models lost in the game added to your D6 roll. It's just models lost this turn. So if you've got a 5-man Marine squad, and in turn 1 I lose a Marine, when I roll the D6, I only lost 1. I can't get higher than an 8. If I lose another couple Marines later in the game, it's still, I can't fail morale test because I only losing 1 guy. So if there's 2 Marines left and I lose 1, I still can't fail a morale test because I only lost 1, and D6 plus 1 is 7. So it never gets progressively worse, which again, that's maybe okay though, because I'm sure there's all these model specific rules and unit specific rules that do different things. But what I find interesting about this rule is larger model units will be more affected by this because let's say a 20-man guard unit, if those exist now, or cultist unit, or 30 mob of orcs, they're pretty easy to kill because there's 30 of them. So if I kill 5 orcs, now I'm rolling the D6 plus 5 in a turn, and I might, kill 4 more. And so it's a much easier in a large mob, and it's much more likely I'm going to kill another good batch next turn and have morale be more effective. Now, I'm sure there's cool like WOG mob rules that reduce that impact, but it's going to be interesting to me to see how they address that because this seems to really favor small squads. In my mind.
But what my counter argument to that, Russ, would be that it's not a function of how small the squad is that makes it difficult for you to get that morale test. It's just how tough those models are, which means they're commensurately more expensive than each individual orc. So if you're focusing fire on that Space Marine unit, theoretically with enough point value to do the same amount of damage, then you're going to wipe out the 5-man unit. There's not going to be anybody there left.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So theoretically, that's taken care of in the point value.
Right.
And so part of your point discount, if you will, for those orcs is that they're more susceptible to this morale phase. If you envision a 10-man, not even a 10-man, if you envision a 5-man squad getting hit with a battle cannon, it's -3 to their save, so they're only saving on 6s and they're getting wounded on 2s because it doubles their toughness. Mm-hmm. So you could conceivably, if you roll well, either wipe them out or kill them down to like 1 man. So you've killed 4 guys. So now they're rolling a die. Obviously, it's not obvious at that point. Do they want to keep their special weapon or their heavy weapon or their sergeant? If they keep their sergeant, they need an 8. But on their roll, they have to roll better than a 4 to keep that guy alive, right?
Well,
or less than a 4.
It's going to be interesting. I need to see it play, right? Because in my head, I imagine all these challenges.
I can see where you're coming from, but I do think it's more of a function of the weediness of the models rather than the number of models in a unit. But we'll see. We'll see, like you said.
Yeah, here's a question. Are there fearless units?
Not so far, no.
Because I remember that being kind of a issue.
Yeah, that was from what I've been like. I knew nothing about 8th edition, 7th edition, and very little of 6th edition. But from what I gather, reading comments and things like that, yeah, apparently everybody had some way to ignore morale tests and fear tests and everything. And to the best of my knowledge, there isn't any of that. Actually, let me bend over here for a second, and I have the Primaris Space Marines book with me. Let me open to an Intercessor Squad, and They Shall Know No Fear is on page 18 of this little booklet. The little booklets that you get are beautiful. They've got all the artwork, all the painting guides, and the faction background and everything. And they know so Space Marines are allowed to reroll failed morale tests. So there you go, right there. So they're not immune, but it's highly unlikely that they're going to lose guys to that particular phase.
So that's pretty much the core rules. And there's a couple advanced rules. I know we're running a little long on time, but Craig, real quick, how are the transport rules? I know they're in the core rules as sort of a sidebar. They're pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, they're very straightforward. A couple awesome changes. Your carrying capacity is your carrying capacity, and it doesn't matter what squad they started in. So as long as it can carry whole squads, if it can carry 12 guys, that could be 2 6-man squads. Cool. Or it could be a 10-man squad and a 2-man command squad or whatever. So so as long as there's space for all the models in your unit, they can get in there. And you can't embark and disembark in the same turn. Embarking is easy. You just have to be all the models have to be within 3 inches of the hull, and then they can get in. Disembarking is easy. They get out and move 3 inches of the hull. You don't have to worry about where the doors are anymore, but it has to happen before the transports before the transport takes off. So you can't charge across with your Rhino and then jump out and assault. Your guys have to get out of the Rhino before the Rhino moves. Vehicles. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you injure the passengers?
If the vehicle gets blown up, all the people get placed. I believe they disembark, and then the vehicle gets removed. And you roll a die for every guy, and on a 1, that guy dies. Okay. Right. So there can be some, but it's not as dangerous as it used to be. And if you're inside the vehicle, basically all special rules that you have and auras that you convey are contained within the vehicle, so they're not. If your models aren't on the board, then they're not affecting the things that are around you. And I'm sure there will be model-specific rules. I'm sure the Guard have command tanks that will allow their command radius to be used. I'm sure the Chimera, the laser guns on the Chimera can probably be used. But for the most part, your guys inside vehicles aren't going to be doing anything. There's no fighting, shooting ports, firing ports, or anything like that. You're in the vehicle until you get out of the vehicle.
Cool.
So very simple.
So that's pretty much most everything. Now, there's some advanced rules, Craig, right about, you kind of highlighted them as we were going through here about different styles of play. There's some advanced terrain rules.
The rule book itself has the city fight rules in it. It has the death from above, which is like adding aerial combat as like having primarily aerial units in a battle. It has battle zones, which add things like night fight and things like that. And every one of those includes cool different ways to spend your command points. In night fight, you can spend a command point to illuminate one enemy unit that nobody has any penalties to shoot at.
Oh, that's cool.
Things like that. So there's a little cool, fluffy ways for you to use your command points. And that's, again, the way they've structured this new system. You can adapt things to all these different kind of scenarios. And the missions in the rulebook, there are 30 missions in the rulebook. And they stretch from the open play, do whatever you want, to very, very specific tournament level missions, to historical missions, to there's a firefight missions, there's a death from above mission. There's and every one of them can be used with any of the other modes. They're just kind of like more geared towards that, including, I can't remember what they're called, but these were in the last couple of editions also. These objective-based missions, there's 6 of them, and they use objective cards. So you've got a hand of cards that are your objectives that you're trying to score, and there's 6 different objectives on the table. And your cards might say, take objective 2, and you get X number of victory points. and you're like, oh crap, now I have to go all the way over here, all the way over there, and those go all the way up to assassinate or kill units in hand-to-hand, and you can adjust and adapt, and you can use command points to discard cards and draw back up to cards, and each one of those 6 missions delineates in a different way how many cards you get and how you can get rid of cards and how often you can score cards and when they score, or if the opponent knows what cards you have, or if they're all secret. So, and that's just one little corner of this whole process with 6 missions out of the 30. So I think they've really, really, really gone above and beyond for the number of missions in the rule book.
That's super cool. So it sounds like there's a lot of, let's have our final thoughts here and talk about this. I know we shouldn't rate the game because we haven't really played it enough, and I haven't played it at all, so we're not going to do that. But let's talk about what is exciting, what's compelling about giving this a go. And Dean, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. But let's start with, we'll let you go last, Dean, so you can listen to all of our nonsense. So, Craig, after you've done the most with it, you've obviously held the game the longest. You've been pouring through the books, fluff-wise and rule-wise, and you've played a game. What's exciting you about the new edition of 8th? What are you worried about?
I felt like I was playing Warhammer 40,000. And yet I was playing a much faster game than Warhammer 40,000 has ever been, I think. The abstractions, even the ones that I went in kind of eyeing askew, really didn't bother me. I really enjoyed them, especially all of the vehicle rules. I felt that the fetid bloat drone worked pretty much exactly as I would have expected. Imagine a sentinel waiting in that was half decent in hand-to-hand combat. Because another thing we should say is everything can wound anything in this game. So even your lasgun can wound a Baneblade if you're lucky. The problem is that you need a 6 to wound, and then he needs to fail his armor save, and a Baneblade's armor save is probably really, really high. And your lasgun is not going to be affected. And to mitigate this, most weapons armor penetration rates went down. So the bolt gun no longer has any armor penetration rate. It doesn't negate anybody's armor. So shooting a bolt gun at the bloat drone, you needed 6s to hit, and then I still had a 3+ save.
6s to wound. Right.
6s to wound, sorry. And so I really enjoy everything that I thought I was a little nervous about really worked out in the game's favor. It was fast. It was fun. Nothing seemed to dominate the game more than anything else. Hand-to-hand was brutal, but shooting was brutal. Psychic powers were really cool and fluffy and flavorful, but didn't tip the balance of the game in any way. And this is, sample of one, so I don't know, what might happen with larger games. I don't with other forces. But coming out of my game from last night, I cannot wait. I'm hoping I can bend time and space to maybe get another game in this weekend, maybe. I'm really excited to see when I ordered a couple indexes from the War Store. I can't wait to get those in and see how my Space Wolves work and how my wider Chaos Army works and my Imperial Guard. So I am very excited, and I hope that the game has the legs that I think it might have now.
Excellent. That's awesome. Let me share my thoughts, and then Dean, you can bring us home here. So I kind of feel there's things that I really am excited about, and there's things I'm a little nervous about. So, and I'm looking at it totally from a rules point of view here, because from a model point of view and variety point of view, it's untouchable. It's still got the most variety of any sci-fi game. The only thing that rivals it in variety is probably Games Workshop's own Age of Sigmar. So, they really own that, and their models are, of course, beautiful. There's no even discussion there.
You're still paying a fortune for the models.
Well, yes, there's still price. And if you look, that's one of the things that makes me a little nervous about it. Most miniature games have an entry point for a player under $100, right? Like a starter box of most armies and most other game systems is under $100. Here at Games Workshop, your starter entries are all over 120, right? So they're definitely...
there's get started army boxes that don't include the indexes that are actually... Right. All those indexes that you notice that are 110, the index sets, are actually box sets that already exist, plus the $25 index included in with no discount.
So how do I get But the difference there, though, is if I buy the starter box of let's say I buy an army box of
No,
rules,
you're right. You need the index.
I get the rules.
Right.
I still got to buy that to be able to play my faction.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So So just a point of, I mean, you're right. There's still the Cadillac / Mercedes of miniature gaming, no doubt about it.
Yes, absolutely.
But they've always been that. That's not a problem. I mean, it's a little bit of a challenge, but those of us who are already sucking into that. The things I like, and I didn't notice this because I didn't see these rules, but the command points really had me intrigued, because one of my big things I was worried about, having only read the 8 pages, was there's no luck mitigation. And almost all modern war games that I like have some form of luck mitigation built in. And command points bring that in. Is it enough? I don't know, but I'll take it. That sounds good. I also like that they affect missions in certain ways, Craig. That's really intriguing to me. So where I think this game is they've done a really good job of making it modularly interesting. Their core rules are super simple. I like those. I like the fight phase a lot. I can't wait to see how that works. I love the global rules for everything around how hitting and wounding works. That is the best change they could have made to 40K. What I'm a little nervous about is, I like the speed, and they have the variety, right? Nobody can touch someone's variety, and I think they've went down a road of, we're going to go with simple and give you depth of variety, which is awesome, right? That way.
Yeah.
Where I'm a little nervous is, I do worry about the small squads. So the 2 worries I have about small squads is I'm having trouble grokking, and maybe there's no way to do this with list building, so it's not a problem. I'm having trouble grokking why I wouldn't field 3 squads of 5 as opposed to 1 squad of 15. Because in all ways I can imagine that's better under the current rule set. Because if they're clumped together, there's no AoE to take them all out. Where if I have a squad of 15, those high volume weapons would get more than 5 guys. And morale, a squad of 5 guys, morale always won't affect them, because I'll either kill all 5 with shooting, or I'll only kill a couple, and my morale's probably a better chance of saving. Where if I have 15 guys and I kill 5 of them, now I'm +5 to morale chest, probably kill more. So but that could be completely and totally not an issue, because if there's special rules around that, who cares?
Right.
The second thing I worry about is, because there's so many cool special rules to make the game really awesome, tracking those in mid-game could be tricky unless they can figure out a card-like system or an app system to allow me to easily keep all my rules together for my various models on the table.
And we should say that there is such an app for Age of Sigmar, and they have stated that they're planning on, they have an app in development for 40K.
So they should solve that problem. It sounds like they are, which is great. Yeah. And so the only thing that I think I'm a little nervous about now that I don't how they're going to solve is there's 2 things I really like about my miniature games. One of them is morale rules and really depth of those. I'm a little nervous about the depth here, but I like that that's there. The other thing I'm worried about is I like to flank. I think flanking is a key element of wargaming, and I'm a little nervous with the loss of any facing, and the loss of armor facing on vehicles, and the loss of firing arcs, that there is no flanking in 40K. And that makes me a little bit nervous. And I don't know how to... I guess true line of sight will mitigate that somewhat. So if you're in a line and I get on your flank, at least your whole army can't see me anymore. But I like the idea... most tank battles, it's all about not firing at the front armor. And what was cool about the older editions of 40K that I loved is that you could play a pretty good armor battle, and it felt reasonably cool, because you're trying to keep your front armor facing, and if the guy's got 2 angles on you now, how do you respond and how do you pivot? That's all gone now, but again, special rules could bring that back. I don't know. It could be a non-issue.
I don't think you're going to see that coming back.
Okay.
I think that was consciously removed from the game.
So that's my
if anything else, you get rid of the arguments about what arc hero.
Exactly. That's true. So that's a bonus, and maybe it's one of those things where
an abstraction,
right? Maybe it's one of those things where I feel like I'm going to lose flanking, but I don't in the end, because there's other ways to mitigate it. So. But those are the things I'm nervous about. But on the whole, I'm extremely positive. I was always telling Craig, I still have my Imperial Guard army. I've never sold it. It was the first army I ever painted. So I'm always happy to play with that. And I did sell off my orcs a while ago, but mostly because the newer orc models look so much cooler. And I swore to myself, if I ever go back to 40K, I'd want the new models anyway. So
I might be able to help you with
these. Do intrigue me with... this is intriguing enough to me that after a few games of my Imperial Guard, and maybe picking up the orc index to stick my toe in the water with orcs. So it's definitely exciting. There isn't a rule for me that like really jumps out at me and goes, ooh, I got to try it because of this, except for the special rules, and that's probably enough, right? So the variety.
Let me put you a little bit at ease with the squad size, for instance. Mm-hmm. The Poxwalkers, you're saying it might be mitigated by special rules, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The Poxwalkers actually have a special rule that is called diseased horde, you add +1 to all your to hit rolls in the fight phase if the unit contains more than 10 models.
There you go. So see, they do that. Yeah. So that's cool.
So that might be a glimmer of hope.
So if guard is that way, then it's like I'm going to take my 10-man guard squad so they're more accurate, even though it makes me more susceptible to high volume fire. Right. So that's perfect.
Yep.
So that's exactly. So it sounds like they've got their ducks in a row here and they're really thinking it through. So Dean, what do you think after all that talking from me and Craig? What excites you about this, being an old school 40k guy?
Well, I'm pretty excited. It doesn't seem like this game is all that fiddly. Sorry,
Dean's getting calls there. People want to know what you think, Dean. They want to know what you think about 40k. Tell them.
That's right.
All right. So, yeah, the thing I'm excited about this. I fear fiddly rules now. I've gotten so used to having really good rules that are very quick to resolve, and I it's to the point now I don't play a game if it's not quick to resolve. And I was a little bit concerned because a lot of my friends online who have played since Rogue Trader in some cases, that they were getting a lot of second edition feels from this rule set. And without knowing any of the details, I'm remembering back my first couple of games and how long those games took.
Right.
And it still only took you only got 4 turns for playing those. And so I was a little bit concerned, but I don't see anything to be worried about as far as that goes, at least not right now. Might be a bit of a problem with the special rules because it might be a case that's going to be important to know your enemy's special rules. And that might be a little bit of a problem, but I'd rather have the basic rules be really simple and get the complexity and the cool stuff.
Right.
The other thing I'm really excited about is that Games Workshop seems to be really trying to reach out to their old fans, and that I'm impressed with. Plus the fact that they're not doesn't look like they're being as crazy with the exchange rate between Canadian and American prices.
Well, that's good.
About 8 years ago, Canadians were probably paying about 30 to 40% more than Americans, even with the exchange rate. And that was really infuriating at the time. But it looks like that's kind of gone away largely because the Canadian dollar is a lot less. But the main question I would have is whether or not how my custom Chaos Space Marine army that's Egyptian themed with mummies and stuff like that, if that can play the way I imagined it when I made it in 3rd edition, and then it kind of got, I wouldn't say debuffed, but I couldn't play with the mummies the way that I wanted to play them because they were demons. And so all of a sudden the Chaos Space Marines were, you didn't have demons and stuff like that for a while. And so that was a little bit problematic, and I'll just see how this goes. But I think given my son's almost 9 years old, this might be almost a perfect time for this kind of game to finally come out.
There you go.
Cool.
So there you have it. 40K could be back, Craig. This could be
That's right.
The dawn of a new age.
It could live up to its new hype of the game you've always wanted.
Well, I'm looking forward to playing more, and we'll certainly keep all of you in the loop as we further down the path here of discovery. Well, Dean, thank you so much for joining us here on the D6 Generation again. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy Kickstarter Torg schedule here to share some time with us.
Yeah, and I should, knock on wood, be able to see you guys at Gen Con.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So, Dean, if people want to follow up with what's going on with you and Torg and everything else on the internet, where should they go?
Probably the best way to do it is to Google Torg Eternity, and that will lead you to our website. We've got a pretty active forum on there. We're also on Facebook. And also, if you are interested in the invasion as it takes place in real time, if you follow at Near Now News, you will see the kind of War of the Worlds style live tweeting going on right now as the invaders take over the world.
Excellent.
Oh, cool.
Got to go check that out then. Well, Dean, thank you so much again, and we look forward to seeing you at Gen Con.
All right, we'll catch you later.
All right, take care, man.
This German Notice is brought to you by all of our friends at Patreon, the men, the women, there may even be some children over there, who go to patreon.com, check out our little video, preferably avoid watching it, and then kick in a couple bucks here or there to help us keep the show going. Today, I would like to thank Shay Wallace, Simon Westerby, Steve Cunyo, Stuart Wilshire, and Teho Fitcow, and I did that wrong. And I've met you, and you live nearby, and it just doesn't matter sometimes. My brain stops. I apologize. Anyway, thank you, and thank you all for supporting the show. Did you ever notice how hard it is sometimes to know what you don't really know? It's kind of, it's funny, and people always make fun of government people for saying things like, we know what we don't know, and we didn't know what we did know, but when you get right down to it, it is very hard to know what you don't actually know. And today, I'm going to talk in a little more detail about zenithal priming, because it's something that I was intrigued by a little while ago, and talked a little bit on the show, and thought I was doing it right with the Rune Wars miniatures. And it turned out I was not actually doing it right with the Rune Wars miniatures. And I didn't know for sure. Or maybe I am, and maybe I've just stumbled upon an even better way to do zenithal priming. What if that's the case? That would actually be pretty cool. What if I'm just that good? I don't think that's what's happening. But anyway, zenithal priming, it comes from the word zenith, which is, of course, above or over. And it means that you are priming in one color. So your model is all one color. And then you're priming again with another color, theoretically a lighter color, from above. Sort of like to hit the highlights. Like a cheap man's dry brushing, really, or a cheap man, or a poor man's airbrush, maybe. And the video that I found to explain it to me, which was good insofar as it explained where the term zenithal came from, because I had no idea where that was coming from either. But zenithal, zenith, above, now I get it. It was a dusting, and they did it in, like, say, black. And then they did a gray, and they were doing a piece of terrain, is what they were painting. So they painted the whole terrain piece black. They primed the whole thing, sprayed the whole thing black. Then they kind of hit it like with short, sharp bursts, way, way high up, so that it sort of dusted with a very light dusting that looked artificial and looked completely fake, as if you had caught it by accident with a spray paint, with the edge of a spray paint spray. And so that's what I did to all of my Rune Wars. I did the undead, the Wakar's legions. I did them with a brown, and then I did a white. I don't know why, but I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And then I did the Dakan Barony forces, the human forces, with a black, and then with a light dusting of white. And I didn't really get it. And you don't have that much control with a spray paint. So the spray paint is it's dark in some places, it's light in other places, and so I really didn't like it. I was not a fan of what I thought I was doing, which I thought was zenithal priming. And I didn't, with my next several projects, I didn't do that at all. Then I was priming. I got a bunch of terrain for Shadow Wars / Warhammer 40,000. I got the warp field generator, which I thought was a huge piece. Turns out to be not such a huge piece for $100 and something. And I got a few more of the kits for the Shadow Wars, for the Adeptus Mechanicus pieces that came in. Turns out the Shadow War Armageddon box set was a crazy good deal at $130. It was even a crazy good deal at $160 because it came with over $250 of terrain inside it. So I wish I had known that when I returned that second box, because I've spent more than that now in trying to ramp up my terrain, because I love the terrain. I think it's awesome. It's all modular, so it all comes apart, stores in a box, and then I can build all these different shapes and sizes. It's a really neat, cool system. So I bought a bunch of that, and I put together the warp field generator, which it is about a foot tall, so that's pretty big for terrain, and it's probably maybe like an 8-inch by 8-inch footprint, maybe not quite that much. And I wanted to have it. I wanted to do with it what I did with all of my other Shadow War stuff, which was I painted all that stuff. I primed it with Army Painter gunmetal, which is a dark metallic. And then I painted up some details. I painted like all of the name plaques and everything with a dark gold color. I painted some of the tubes and piping different colors, like some white and some red. I hit all the dials with white and then a little slice of each dial red. So I basically pointed up some details, and then I did the whole thing in strong tone stain, the Army Painter strong tone stain, which does not make it look like, it doesn't grit it out. It's not dark, it's actually brown, so it makes it look sort of like all covered in oil. And then that's glossy, as Kelly noted. Kelly the man, Kelly the listener, who I thought was Kelly the girl, and that was embarrassing, so I apologize for that, because I can't remember if I've apologized for that sense. I gotta apologize for so much. It's glossy, so you have to then hit it with Army Painter. Army Painter should be a sponsor. I don't know. Army Painter Dull Coat. So it all dulled it up, and it looked great. So that's what I was going to do with this stuff, but I knew I didn't have enough time to paint it, so I wanted to get it to a slightly better stage of painting than just painting it with one coat of the gunmetal. And then I got this idea. What if I kind of combine this concept that was growing in my head of zenithal painting with regular priming? So I primed the whole thing black, and then I primed it again. And this I got this idea because usually when I prime, if I'm not careful, there's large chunks of area like the underneath of the model, like under the arms and maybe inside the arms or under the legs, that doesn't get primed and stays the color of the basic material. So, metal or plastic or bones, whatever it is. And so I thought, well, what if I make sure I prime it all very carefully with a dark color, and then I go over it with my base color. So I painted it all black, and then I primed it, and I did a pretty good job, but I did it at an angle. And this comes from lighting design, but I did it, I made sure that I was never spraying directly on it. I was spraying up from above at an angle, and what happened was, it was great. Most of it was metal, but the underside of things and the outlines of, the lower level outlines of things were all still dark or black. And so I got a 2-level painting effect just from the spray. And so I did that, and then I did all of my other terrain that I had lined up, and it looks great. I haven't done any more detail painting on it at all yet, but it already looks good enough that you can put it on the table because it's clear that some detail, it looks dry brushed. It looks like it's detailed. It's good. And then I thought, well, would I be able to do this with actual models? So when the Warhammer 40,000 box set arrived, I thought this is the perfect opportunity because I have over 50 models that I want to get painted to a reasonable quality very, very quickly. So the Nurgle, these are Space Marines, Demon Engines, and basically zombies that are all devoted to the god of decay and disease. So it's supposed to be gross and gribbly and gross and slimy and stuff like that. So with them, I made sure I got a nice dark brown, matte brown primer coat on the whole model, everywhere, underneath, above, everything. And then I did this new kind of zenithal priming thing that I'm doing with the necrotic flesh from, of course, Army Painter. And I did it from above, but I did it not just like a dusting spray, but I did it like a decent, I did passes, and I did it at an angle again so that it would accentuate the details and leave those shadowed areas. But for the most part, the model was that necrotic flesh. And I wanted to add the Primaris Marines to my Space Wolves chapter, because I've already got 1 billion points of Space Wolves painted up, and I figured why start something new. So with them, I painted them all black, made sure they were completely painted black, and then I did this Zenithal painting with Wolf Grey, which is another spray. So I've spent a lot of money on Army Painter spray, I just realized. But anyway, I did the same thing on that, and it looked great. And it gives you, it's not, tabletop playing quality yet, but with a little bit of extra detail. Like, I spent one evening doing a quick dry brush of the base coats to sort of neaten everything up, and then a couple highlights. And everything in both armies was ready for some detail painting, and boom, you were done to put it on the board. So I was very excited. I was very happy. I think I'll probably be doing this from now on, and I thought I should share this with you guys. It's been a very long time since I've done any kind of painting thing, and did you ever notice? And I thought I knew what Zenithal painting was until I stumbled over this technique on my own, and so I didn't know what I didn't know. I thought I knew it, and I didn't. And that's about all I've got to say on that. So go ahead and try it out. And happy listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA Discussions Forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.